Hey everyone, welcome back. This is the final episode of the series. Thank you everyone for listening, and we hope you'll continue to tune in for our future series. Chapters 1801 through 1820 of the previous episode. Qin Mu gains absolute control over the 72 palaces by completely absorbing his divine treasure domain into his body. This grants him unparalleled power, enabling him to successfully utilize the method of using strength to achieve Tao. With this immense strength, he easily deconstructs and neutralizes the prehistoric Miluo Tao burial ritual aimed to cripple him. By manipulating the 16 rivers of chaos and wielding his universe flood bell, Qin Mu shatters the formations of the 12 palace masters and forces the prehistoric Tao practitioners into retreat. If possible, you can support me via PayPal or become a channel member to help me keep this channel running. Thank you. Now let's get back to the story of Tales of Herding Gods audio series. Chapter 1821. Tao Fatherland breaking through the heavenly well. The primal chaos energy disappeared, and what greeted everyone's eyes was an ancient lamp. That lamp was just a simple oil lamp, and beneath it was a small bowl. There was a small amount of clear oil in the bowl, and there was a wick on the edge of the bowl. However, this lamp hadn't been lit, and the oil didn't seem to be much either. The eyes of Hua Du and the other 6 hall masters flashed, and they suddenly charged towards that oil lamp. Just as they charged out, Lan Yuqian had already snatched the oil lamp in his hand. The Hua Du hall master hurriedly stopped, but when he saw that the 4 hall masters were still rushing towards Lan Yuqian, he hurriedly shouted, "Don't go! Quickly retreat!" His figure retreated, but the 4 hall masters already had no time to retreat. When Lan Yuqian held the oil lamp in his palm, the lamp had already lit up automatically. The light from the lamp had a strange purple color, and within a short period of time, the purple light had already illuminated the entire hall. Hall Master of Huadu had already retreated to the entrance of the hall. When he was illuminated by the purple light, he instantly felt that everything about him had been completely illuminated by the light. It was as if all of his paths, skills, and divine arts had been completely seen through. He was astonished and quickly left the hall. With a quick glance, he felt that the shape of the flame was extremely strange. It was like a purple evil eye with dozens of pupils. The reason why it was called an evil eye was because the purple pupil was vertical, like the vertical eye in the heart of Qin Mu's brows. However, the pupil and the center of the flame had a total of 41 layers, and the color of the pupil was purple. The flame in the center was chaotic. 1. When it was illuminated by the light, it was as if the purple evil eye had seen through all paths, skills, and divine arts. There wasn't a single secret to speak of. The moment the hall master of Huadu stepped out of the hall, the 4 hall masters in the hall suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream in unison. Then there was no more sound. The heart of the hall master of Huadu felt like it was being twisted by a knife, but he did not dare to stay any longer. He whistled into the distance. Meanwhile, in the hall, Lan Yuqian held the oil lamp in his hands and stared blankly at the flame of the lamp. The scene that had just happened was really strange. The oil lamp was lit up, and the flame of the lamp was like the evil eye of the purple-eyed evil eye. That eye actually rotated 1 round in the light, and its gaze fell on the bodies of the 4 hall masters one after another. The 4 hall masters were almost simultaneously illuminated by the evil eye in the light. The great Tao on the bodies of the 4 hall masters rapidly turned into green smoke, and even their Tao trees, Tao fruits, and their treasured palaces all turned into green smoke. The 4 hall masters only had time to let out a miserable cry before they directly evaporated in front of him. Strange! Truly strange! Lan Yuqian cried out and almost threw the lamp away. When the lamp shone, he could even see everything about the 4 palace masters through the flame. Their divine abilities, Tao arts, Tao tree, Tao fruit, and Tao temple were all broken down into the tiniest of runes. It was as if they were broken down into the tiniest of particles. However, he did not expect that the evil eye in the lamp would be so terrifying when it shone. Brother's lamp was used to steal the Taoist connotation of the palace master of Miluo Palace to turn it into lamp oil when he was lecturing here. It was used to steal the exquisiteness of his teachings to turn it into a wick, and use his Tao of chaos to turn it into an evil eye. Lan Yuqian carefully examined the lamp oil and saw that the 4 palace masters had been killed by the evil eye. A small portion of the lamp oil had also been consumed, He felt a chill in his heart. When the palace master of the Miluo Palace preached the Tao, regardless of whether it was the palace master of the Miluo Palace, the palace master, or the young master, none of their supernatural powers and Tao techniques could surpass the palace master of the Miluo Palace. Therefore, when the lamplight shone on them, there was no more secret to speak of. However, the oil of the lamp is limited, so this lamp can't be lit for too long. I have to deal with the other 6 great treasures before the oil of the lamp burns out. But he quickly left the hall and headed straight for the ancestral court's origin cauldron. But can this lamp be a match for those 6 great treasures? The oil lamp was a treasure, but the treasures such as Heavenly Well, Purple Clouds, Great Prison, and Echo Mirror were also treasures refined by the young master of Miluo Palace. Whether the oil lamp could deal with these 6 great treasures was something Lan Yuqian didn't have the confidence to do. When Lan Yuqian entered the ancestral court's cauldron of origin, he saw Su Shenghua leading eternal peace practitioners to resist the army of the practitioners of Miluo Palace. As for the 6 great rare treasures, there was also a massacre. The power of the 6 great rare treasures had already completely suppressed the power of the ancestral court's cauldron of origin, making it unable to unleash even the slightest bit of its power. Not only that, the hall master and practitioners of Miluo Palace gathered beside the 6 great rare treasures. The power of the 6 great rare treasures spread out in all directions, killing founding emperor Qin Fengqing and the others until they were covered in wounds. The heavenly well of the eldest young master was the most powerful. Not only did it pierce through the origin cauldron, but it also pierced a huge hole in the entire ancestral court. It even hung high in the center, straight up and down like a huge tornado, stirring up the wind and clouds. It made the entrance of the ancestral court grow bigger and bigger. The power of the origin cauldron of the ancestral court within a radius of 10,000 kilometers was completely absorbed by this well. This well was a treasure that had pierced through the destruction tribulation. From the outside, it looked as if it had no physical object. It was impossible to tell what it was made of, but its power was simply too strong. Founding Emperor and the others killed their way to the side of the well and fought their way around it, fighting against the Tao Achievers and Hall Masters of Miluo Palace. Beside him, Eternal Peace Tao Achievers would be struck into the well from time to time. They would let out earth-shattering screams and fall into the well, falling into the destruction tribulation of the past universe. Founding Emperor was in imminent danger as well, and he could be struck into the well at any moment. On the other side, Second Young Master's purple clouds of smoke were wreaking havoc in the sky. The Hall Masters of Miluo Palace stood on the purple clouds of smoke and came and went like the wind. The purple clouds of smoke were the treasures formed by the 36th Heavenly Tao realm of Second Young Master Wuji. From time to time, the wind of heat and silence would burst forth. Waves of heat and silence would blow past and erode the sky and land of Ancestral Court, destroying the power of the cauldron of origin of Ancestral Court. Xing'an would lead eternal peace practitioners to charge into the smoke. Almost everyone around him died in the smoke, and Xing'an's corporeal body was destroyed one after another. The power of Great Prison, Echo Mirror, and other treasures were also extremely terrifying. Even the Hall Masters of Eternal Peace couldn't withstand them, let alone Tao practitioners. The mountains and rivers of Ancestral Court's cauldron of origin were shattered, and the first heavy weapon that had been refined for 3.5 billion years could be destroyed at any time under the attacks of the 6 great unique treasures. Lan Yuqian carried the oil lamp and flew toward the nearest unique treasure. That unique treasure was refined by 6th Young Master Zhan Ji. After it was brought up by the Hall Master and Tao practitioners of Miluo Palace, it became like chains. The chains expanded like a black dragon with bone spikes all over its body. Shuttling through the mountains and rivers of Ancestral Court, they broke through the cauldron of origin of the Ancestral Court. The bodies of the black dragons swayed, and countless bone spikes and spears shot out in all directions. They destroyed Tao trees, passed through Tao fruits, and destroyed the great all-heaven of the Ancestral Court. They didn't encounter any resistance. There were even Hall Masters and Tao Achievers of Miluo Palace standing on the back of the black dragons, killing eternal peace experts in pain. Lan Yuqian urged the oil lamp, his heart filled with anxiety. Whether this oil lamp can defeat 6th Young Master Zhan Ji's unique treasure, whether eternal peace wins or loses, it all depends on this one move. The light of the oil lamp suddenly shone brightly, becoming abnormally dazzling. Purple light shone in all directions, and the flame seemed to have become incomparably huge, like a torch that had been magnified billions of times. Lan Yuqian looked behind the flame and saw that the evil eye with purple pupils had also become incomparably huge. In the 40 layers of purple pupils, the evil eye of chaos slowly revolved and shone towards the black dragon chains. In the sky and on the ground, the black dragon chains intersected and interweaved, continuously destroying the ancestral court's origin cauldron. Suddenly, the black dragons disintegrated under the light and turned into streaks of green smoke. The feet of the palace masters and Dao practitioners standing on the back of the black dragons became empty and they all fell down. However, they were shown by the eyes of the purple-eyed evil eye and immediately evaporated, turning into streaks of green smoke. What a pity for the lamp oil! Lan Yuqian was both surprised and happy, but he also felt sorry for the lamp oil. He quickly withdrew his magic power and saw that the lamp oil in the bowl was much less. The lamp oil was not much to begin with. Now, he was not worried about the power of this lamp, but he was worried about whether the lamp oil was enough to deal with the other 5 great treasures. Using this lamp to kill the palace masters and Dao practitioners of the Miro Palace was indeed easy, but the lamp oil was not enough to kill all the palace masters and Dao practitioners. It could only be used to deal with the treasures of the young master of the Miro Palace. It was truly a pity to waste the lamp oil on the palace masters and Dao practitioners of Miluo Palace. He immediately lifted the oil lamp and chased after the next unusual treasure. At that moment, Palace Master Huadu led many Dao practitioners to kill him and block his path. It was clear that Palace Master Huadu had noticed the profoundness of the oil lamp and thought of the crux of the matter. Even though he was afraid of dying under the strange power of the oil lamp, if he could use up all the oil in the oil lamp, eternal peace would have no chance of winning. Lan Yuqian was in a great hurry and was fighting to the death to protect the oil lamp. However, more and more Dao practitioners were rushing over and trapping him. There were even more Dao practitioners rushing over, clearly planning to use their lives to fight. At that moment, a lotus appeared in the void. Su Shanghua took 1 step at a time, 1 flower at a time, and 1 ancestral court. He charged into the battle and said in a deep voice, "I'll block them, you quickly break the other treasures." Su Shanghua blocked Huadu and the others, allowing Lan Yuqian to catch his breath and escape immediately. Soon, great prison, flying smoke and supernatural mirror were all destroyed under the light of the oil lamp. The pressure on Eternal Peace's Dao practitioners was greatly reduced, but after this battle, they suffered heavy casualties as well. The mountains and rivers of Ancestral Court's Cauldron of Origin were destroyed. Looking over, it was a complete mess. The oil in the oil lamp in Lan Yuqian's hand was bottomless. Lan Yuqian's heart sank as he rushed to the final treasure, the Heavenly Well. 1. The Heavenly Well was getting bigger and bigger. It was so big that the Ancestral Court's Chaotic Origin Cauldron was collapsing. Below the Chaotic Origin Cauldron was a huge destruction. The Ancestral Court's mountains and rivers were falling into the well. The power of the eldest young master's supreme treasure was extremely shocking. Lan Yuqian activated the last of the lamp oil, and the lamp light shone toward the heavenly well that was getting bigger and bigger. The lamp light shone on the heavenly well. Wherever the purple-eyed evil eye shone, the heavenly well was constantly destroyed and turned into green smoke that drifted away. However, the big well continued to grow, causing Lan Yuqian's heart to sink. The heavenly well grew as much as the purple-eyed evil eye destroyed the heavenly well. He really did not expect this scene. Finally, the lamp oil was used up, and the light gradually dimmed. The wick of the lamp was also burning shorter and shorter. Lan Yuqian was panicking. Without the wick, what was the use of this lamp? Yes, this lamp can illuminate the mysteries of all people and things. Before the light goes out, I can observe all the secrets of the heavenly well. He immediately opened his eyes wide and looked at the heavenly well through the light. In the light, the heavenly well was a countless number of changing primordial chaos runes. There were endless changes, constantly self-generating. Lan Yuqian memorized crazily, but the wick of the lamp burned out, and the light gradually extinguished. I can remember it. I can understand all the mysteries of the heavenly well. I will never forget those changes. I can find the flaws in the heavenly well. Lan Yutian shouted loudly and closed his eyes tightly. He deeply imprinted the process of the billions of primordial chaos runes changing in the heavenly well into his mind. That's right, the heavenly well can be blocked. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and cheered in his heart. At this moment, he saw a flaw in the heavenly well and immediately threw out the small bowl of the oil lamp. The small bowl whistled into the well. Lan Yutian also flew into the well at this moment and followed closely behind the small bowl. Just as the small bowl was about to fall into the calamity of destruction, Lan Yutian's body shook. Countless arms pointed towards the four walls of the heavenly well in all directions, locking down the primal chaos runes. The runic circulation of the heavenly well immediately stopped for a moment. At the same time, the small bowl expanded and stuck at the bottom of the well. The heavenly well immediately stopped functioning. Lan Yutian's legs went weak, and he fell to the bottom of the bowl, crying tears of joy. Lan Yutian sat in the well and saw that the heavenly well was still fighting against the lamp bowl. The palace master and the Tao practitioners of the Miluo Palace were still using the heavenly well in an attempt to drive the lamp bowl out from the bottom of the heavenly well. The lamp bowl was stuck at the bottom of the well and was constantly shaking. The heavenly well was unable to do anything to the lamp bowl for a time. However, Lan Yutian had only found a temporary flaw in the heavenly well. He had not cracked the heavenly well. The lamp bowl was suppressing the power of the heavenly well, but it would also cause the power of the heavenly well to accumulate stronger and stronger. One day, it would surpass the limit of the lamp bowl and crush the lamp bowl into pieces. The foundation of Miluo Palace is still strong. If not for primordial Lord Nanxiang's warning and telling us about the 7 great treasures, eternal peace would have been caught off guard and would have been completely wiped out. He and Su Shanghua were the ones with the best aptitude in eternal peace, but neither of them could refine a treasure like young masters. The one who could deal with the treasures of Miluo Palace was ultimately the treasures of Miluo Palace. Such a foundation. Eternal peace was still far from being able to compare. At the mouth of Heavenly Well, the battle of Tao practitioners was still continuing. Lan Yuntian roused his spirit and crawled out of the well. It was only a matter of time before Heavenly Well broke through the lamp bowl. He had to drag his useful body to fight with the Hall Master of the Tao practitioners of Miluo Palace. If he couldn't destroy him, then he had to rely on the secrets of Heavenly Well that he had seen in the last light to think of a way to break through Heavenly Well and get rid of this hidden danger. However, without the light bowl, it would probably take a long time to solve this hidden danger. I wonder how Big Brother is doing? Qin Mu's figure appeared in front of his eyes as he thought to himself. Facing the unusual treasures of the 6 young masters of Miluo Palace, the Tao practitioners of Eternal Peace had suffered heavy casualties while Qin Mu was the 2 young masters of Miluo Palace. One could imagine how dangerous it was. On the surface of one of the 16 rivers of chaos that revolved around Miluo Palace, young Master Ling Zhao's expression was solemn. Over the past few days, young Master Zi Zhao's divine arts were constantly coming from the fog of chaos to attack him. Wounds also appeared on his body. However, what made his heart heavy wasn't the wounds on his body, but the changes in young Master Zi Zhao's divine arts of Sword Path. Young Master Zi Zhao's divine arts of Sword Path were still powerful, but Ling Xiao could still sense the minute changes in his heart from the changes in young Master Zi Zhao's divine arts of Sword Path. The changes in his heart would be reflected in the minute details of the divine arts. Even though the power of the divine arts wouldn't change, the ripples on his Tao heart would still affect the perfection of his Tao skills. Young Master Zi Zhao's abilities weren't weaker than his, but his Tao heart was lacking. On top of that, Qin Mu was a monster that was good at controlling people's hearts, so he couldn't help worrying about young Master Zi Zhao's safety. Old 7 used a strange method to disturb Old 4's Tao heart. This method has been subtly influencing Old 4's Tao heart from the moment they exchanged blows. It's just that he didn't show it before, but it's starting to show now. His heart became heavier and heavier. Qin Mu should have used the path of divine consciousness, or the path of reincarnation to slowly influence young Master Zi Zhao. Besides the visible divine arts, he should have used invisible divine consciousness or reincarnation divine arts to attack young Master Zi Zhao's Tao heart. This kind of influence was extremely slow at the beginning, but as time passed, the influence gradually increased. Furthermore, Old 7's abilities can't compare to Old 4. Logically speaking, Old 7 would have lost very quickly, but Old 7 can persist for so long, which means that Old 7's abilities are constantly improving. The corners of his eyes trembled as he recalled the ancient records left behind by young Master Hun Dun in the Tao repository of Miluo Palace. Everyone in the Miluo Palace, including the master of the Miluo Palace, had left their own Taoist techniques and divine abilities in the Taoist canon. Young Master Hun Dun had also left behind his own books, and many people had read them before. After the master of the Miluo Palace read young Master Hun Dun's books, he was silent for a long time. He told them that young Master Hun Dun's books were so profound that he could not fully understand them. Young Master Ling Xiao had also flipped through the books, but he could not understand them at all. The master of the Miluo Palace told them that the words in the books were written using the Tao of Hun Dun, and the runes of the Tao of Hun Dun were called Yuan. They were runes that surpassed the primordial chaos runes. If young Master Hun Dun could completely perfect the Yuan, then he would achieve an achievement that he could not even reach. However, this path was extremely difficult. He did not think that anyone could achieve such an achievement. At that time, young Master Ling Xiao and the others did not realize how terrifying Yuan was. Each of them had their own unique achievements that even the master of the Miluo Palace could not achieve. They thought that young master's primal chaos Yuan was similar to the second young master's path of the ultimate and the fourth young master's path of the sword. Now it seemed that their thoughts back then were more or less naive. The Miluo Palace master's praise for Yuan was probably a praise for the path of primal chaos that had completely surpassed the path of primordial chaos. It's impossible for the current seventh brother to be so strong, but under the tempering of fourth brother, he's gradually becoming stronger. He blocked another wave of sword moves and looked around, but he still couldn't find where Miluo Palace was. Sword lights flickered in Miluo Palace. Young Master Zishao stabbed Qinmu with his sword, and Qinmu suddenly heard the sound of a zither. It was the sound of his dead wife's zither. The zither sound wasn't someone playing the Tao Attainment's tune of Zishao, but came from his Tao heart. Even if he didn't want to listen to it, he couldn't block it. Qinmu definitely had some technique or divine art that could attack his Tao heart's weakness and awaken his longing for his dead wife. In this life and death battle, he tried his best to avoid his Tao heart being affected, but it was still affected. He used his wife's song of Tao to achieve Tao. This song had been deeply imprinted in his Tao heart Tao technique. He could cut off the flaws in his Tao heart, but he could not do it. Suddenly the bell rang. Just as the zither song in his Tao heart rang, the universe bell struck his body. Zishao grunted and fell backward. He flew out of the Miluo Palace and landed on a long river of chaos. He was about to kill his way back to the Miluo Palace when his heart suddenly trembled. He lowered his head and looked into the river. He saw his wife. This long river was the destruction of the 10th epoch. He saw that in the long river, he was obsessed with the sword and had fallen into madness. He had neglected his wife. However, his wife had always been by his side, taking care of him. He had devoted all of his body and mind to studying the 23 styles of the sword. He even felt that his wife had become more annoying than ever. She was an obstacle on his path to success. More than once he had roughed up his wife, swore at her, and tried to drive her away. He even tried to kill her. However, his wife still did not leave him. She still understood him, loved him, and tried to help him achieve the Tao. He was too slow. Because he was obsessed with the sword, he ignored his wife's care and love for him. He also ignored the approaching destruction. However, his wife sensed it. She felt that he could not overcome the destruction and would die in it. Therefore, in the years before the destruction, she devoted her body and mind to how to help him achieve the Tao. However, she had never considered how she would overcome the destructive tribulation. She had finally created the Song of Purple Clouds to attain Tao. The Song of Tao became the final sound and helped Purple Clouds attain Tao. After Purple Clouds attained Tao, the destructive tribulation descended. Only then did he know what his wife had sacrificed. His extreme sword had turned into extreme emotion, and he was desperately trying to protect his wife from the destructive tribulation. However, it was already too late. His wife was unable to overcome this destruction tribulation. Even though she possessed heaven-defying talent and could help Zixiao attain the Tao and become the future fourth young master of the Miluo Palace, she was unable to protect her own life during the Destruction Tribulation. During the Destruction Tribulation, they had passed their final moments of warmth. Zixiao stood on the surface of the river and watched this scene. This was a tribulation that his Tao heart could not jump out of. He landed in the sky above the apocalypse of the 10th epoch, and saw that all his efforts and struggles in the apocalypse were unable to save his wife. Qinmu landed on the surface of the river and didn't make a move. Instead, he waited quietly. After a long while, Zixiao retracted his gaze. He raised his head and said indifferently, "Old Seven, you sent me here in hopes that my Tao heart would collapse? Then you are wrong. I came here only to strengthen my Tao heart. I have to defeat you to be able to save my wife in the future. Therefore, I will definitely do my best in this battle." Qinmu's gaze landed on Zixiao and Zixiao, who were hugging each other in the 10th epoch's Destruction Tribulation. He said indifferently, "Fourth senior brother, do you think I used divine arts to affect your Tao heart? Actually, I could have done it, but I didn't. Your Tao heart disintegrated bit by bit. Everything came from yourself. It was you who missed your wife when you used Sword Path. It was you who felt guilty about your Tao heart. I didn't do anything." A sneer appeared on his face, but his gaze didn't look at Zixiao. Instead, he was still looking at the history of the 10th epoch. Any sword move you use will make you feel that your achievements came from your wife. You defeated yourself. Zixiao's expression sank. Qinmu raised his head and his gaze landed on his face. He smiled and said, "I have already understood your sword path all these days, so why did I hit you just now? Because your Tao heart is broken and your flaw is getting bigger and bigger. However, I can borrow the power of Destruction Tribulation in the River of Chaos to raise my cultivation to a level that can contend with you." Young Master's purple Heaven Tao sword shook, and sword light stabbed over. Qinmu rose into the air and landed on Hall of Chaos. He rushed forward to meet the sword lights, and countless sword lights came stabbing over. The sword lights were shimmering, and they seemed to have gathered all the thoughts that Purple Heaven had for his wife in the 10th epoch, turning into a supreme sword path. Under the eaves of Hall of Chaos, the universe bell shook non-stop, stirring up the River of Chaos. The Qi of Chaos turned into world after world, and its power shot out in all directions, sweeping away the sword lights. Whoosh! The world tree took root in the River of Chaos, and thick roots pierced through it to absorb the power of destruction. At the same time, the lotus flower of returning ruins appeared, making the river stand on its head. His lotus platform of returning ruins was also absorbing the power of destruction. The two sacred objects raised Qinmu's magic power in a straight line, making it incomparably vigorous. Qinmu's divine arts were ever-changing, and he slaughtered his way over. He raised Great Change Divine Axe and slashed down. Zixiao raised his sword to block, and a loud sound rang out. Zixiao's body leaned back, and his feet stepped on the surface of the river. His arms were shaken until they were numb. It was indeed as Qinmu had said. Qinmu had already understood his sword path divine arts. Under the circumstances where he had borrowed the power of the River of Chaos, Qinmu's magic power wouldn't be weaker than his, but stronger. The tide of strength had reversed, and he was instantly at a disadvantage. Furthermore, his Tao heart was indeed lacking. When the Tao sword in his hand met the axe, a crack had already appeared on it, just like his Tao heart. Hall of Chaos whizzed over, and Qinmu stood at the top of the hall before slashing down with another axe. Zixiao received the axe head-on once more, and another loud sound rang out. The Tao sword shattered with a crack, and his entire body flew backward. Blood spurted out of his mouth, and countless wounds exploded all over his body. Qinmu caught up to him and slashed down with his axe once more. At that moment, the faint sound of a zither came over, and Qinmu was stunned. He had indeed heard the sound of the zither. His Tao heart wasn't lacking, and he didn't have the experience Zixiao had. It was impossible for him to have hallucinations like Zixiao and hear the sound of the zither, but the sound of the zither had truly entered his ears. Zixiao's Tao attainment tune. It was indeed Zixiao's Tao attainment tune. This tune was the same as Zixiao's Tao attainment tune played by Heavenly Venerate You. However, the tune contained a strong emotion that Heavenly Venerate You did not have. It was so strong that it could not be dispelled. It was a longing that his wife had for her husband. Fourth young master Zishao was obsessed with the sword, but she was extremely in love with her husband. She placed all her emotions on Zishao. In the years before the calamity, if she could focus on transcending the calamity, she would be able to survive it, but she wanted her husband to survive even more. Qin Mu inadvertently took a glance and saw the woman playing her zither in the river of chaos below. The sound of the zither had actually passed through the calamity and reached the surface of the river. Clearly, the woman had seen the battle outside the calamity and had given her husband a last helping hand at the final moment. Heavenly Venerate, you didn't have any emotions, but they poured out from her zither music, giving Qin Mu a bad feeling. Qi. The broken sword in Zizhao's hand suddenly shot out rays of light in all directions. It was a sword path that Qin Mu had never seen before. When the sword light arrived, it directly broke his great divine art of too easy tree cutting and broke the divine axe. Qin Mu executed his chaos divine art, and his chaos divine art had some achievements. He planned to use Zizhao's sword path to kill young master Ling Xiao, but the sword lights broke through his chaos divine art and stabbed his body. Qin Mu gave a muffled grunt, and the wounds all over his body exploded. The universe flood bell rang, but in the next moment, the divine bell was pierced by the sword lights, and the sound of the bell became hoarse. Qin Mu used all kinds of divine arts to defend with all his might, but in Zizhao's Dao curve, be it the lotus platform of sinkhole or the Dao fruit on the world tree, they were all pierced by Zizhao's sword. There's no emotion in the Dao curve of Zizhao's Dao, so it's a flaw in Zizhao's Dao heart. But with emotion, Zizhao's sword path will advance another step. Qin Mu resisted with all his might. Even if he borrowed boundless strength, he couldn't block that stunning Dao sword. Zishao seemed to be in an extreme realm, a realm that he had never reached. He unleashed the power of the sword to the extreme. Boom! Qin Mu's 10,000 swords pierced through his heart, and blood splattered in all directions in the sword light. They tumbled and flew over the river surface, almost crashing into the river of chaos. Fortunately, a lotus leaf grew out from the river surface and held him up. Qin Mu got up, but his knees went soft and he almost fell down. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth as he stared at Zishao, who was on the river. His heart became heavier and heavier. With the help of his wife, Zishao was undefeatable. He really couldn't think of any other way to defeat Zishao and his wife. Suddenly, the sound of the zither gradually disappeared. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He looked into the river and saw the figure of Zizhao's wife, who had been destroyed in the calamity. He raised his head to look at Zishao, only to see that the fourth young master of Miluo Palace was also looking down at this scene. Suddenly, the shoulder of this invincible existence started to tremble. Zishao remembered the scene of his wife dying in the calamity. At that time, his wife had played the last song for him. He didn't know why his wife hadn't resisted the destruction calamity at the last moment and instead wanted to play the last song, so she had exhausted her last bit of life force and died in the calamity. After that, he had been pondering over why his wife had done that for 6 universe eras. Until now, he finally understood. When his wife saw this scene in the destruction tribulation, she saw that he was about to lose and die in Qin Mu's hands, so she used her last bit of life force to exchange for her victory. Fourth senior brother. Qin Mu opened his mouth, and young master Zishao threw the broken sword in his hand. He looked at him silently before leaping into the river of chaos. Junior brother, you win. He fell into the river of chaos and his voice sounded out. I can't pass the test of Dao heart. I hope you're right. Qin Mu struggled to come to the side of the lotus leaf and looked down. Young master Zishao had returned to the moment before the apocalypse and was hugging his wife deeply. Qin Mu was stunned. If the heavens had love, the heavens would also be old. Even someone as powerful as young master Zishao was eventually crushed by his Dao heart and stepped into the calamity. However, the moment he entered the calamity, he should have been blissful. Qin Mu let out a turbid breath and suddenly, a long whistle came from the river. Qin Mu's expression sank. Young master Ling Xiao had finally found this place while he was heavily injured. Young master Ling Xiao panted heavily as he dragged his Dao spear. With a gloomy expression, he stomped heavily on the surface of the sea and walked towards Qin Mu step by step. He was still one step too late. When the power of Zizhao's sword path erupted, he could also sense the world-shaking sword might and even hear the sound of Zizhao's zither. He had followed the sound of the zither to come here. The power of Zizhao's sword path shocked and delighted him. He felt that Qin Mu would definitely not be able to block Zizhao's sword and that victory was in his grasp. However, when he came here, he saw Zizhao's figure sinking into the river. Zizhao's Dao heart collapsed just like what he had been worried about. He gave up everything and returned to the destruction tribulation to accompany his dead wife. Third senior brother. Qin Mu greeted him. Even though his injuries were extremely serious, he still didn't lose his manners. Fourth senior brother has gotten what he wanted. What does third senior brother want? I'll try my best to satisfy senior brother. The fury in young master Ling Zhao's heart gradually calmed down. There were also many sword wounds on his body which were caused by Zizhao's sword. However, compared to Qin Mu, his injuries were much lighter. Seventh brother, I'm not like fourth brother. His Dao heart is lacking and it's easy for you to take advantage of it. However, my Dao heart doesn't have any weakness and is completely transparent. If you had met me in the beginning, you would have lost without a doubt. Qin Mu smiled slightly and retreated step by step. His Dao blood dripped into the river of chaos, and the Dao wounds that young master Zizhao had left on him were too heavy. Even he would find it hard to recover in a short period of time. Against fourth senior brother, I indeed don't have any chance of winning. When fourth senior brother's abilities were completely unleashed, he was stunning and left me in awe. I think third senior brother must have the same ability. Therefore, I've prepared another battle for senior brother. The river of chaos under their feet turned into a huge ring. Qin Mu walked on the river surface of the inner part of the river while young master Ling Xiao dragged his long spear and followed his footsteps closely. Suddenly there was a whoosh, and another river of chaos came rushing over. Qin Mu's footsteps landed on the river of chaos, and young master Ling Xiao's footsteps also landed on the river of chaos, not giving him any chance to escape. Whoosh! Another river rolled over, and Qin Mu moved his feet to step on it. Young master Ling Xiao still followed him, and his battle intent became higher and higher. His killing intent became stronger and stronger. He was prepared to use his strongest strike to kill Qin Mu directly, not giving him any chance. Even when I was at my peak, I didn't dare to say that I could defeat senior brother, let alone now that I'm at the end of my rope. Qin Mu moved his feet, making it difficult for young master Ling Zhao's qi dynamic to lock onto him. The 7 young masters of Mycroft Palace all have the ability to pass through destruction tribulation, but only 3 of them can pass through life creation tribulation. First young master Grand Supreme, second young master Wuji, and me. The moment he finished speaking, young master Ling Zhao's expression changed slightly. He moved with Qin Mu's footsteps and before he knew it, his surroundings were no longer a river of chaos, but a sea of chaos. He looked around and saw that the river of chaos had disappeared without a trace. He couldn't see where it had gone. He raised his head and saw countless 16th epic universes. Those universes were like countless facets of time, forming the history of the 16th epoch. When he turned his head back, he saw countless 17th epochs. They were actually also countless facets. The history and future of the entire 17th epoch were revealed in front of him. Following that, everything turned into chaos. Whether it was the 16th epoch or the 17th epoch, they all vanished. He looked down and couldn't see the sea of chaos anymore. At that moment, he saw countless Qin Mu and countless of himself. In front of him and behind him, he could see himself and Qin Mu everywhere. Each of them seemed to have their own consciousness and were looking around, but all of their faces revealed wary expressions. Young master Ling Xiao stretched out his hand to wipe away the face in front of him. At that moment he touched the back of his head. The rest of them did all sorts of actions. Some touched the other's face, some looked around, and some stepped on the soles of the other's feet, making different actions. He simply couldn't count how many of them there were. This is the premonition that life creation tribulation is about to erupt. Countless Qin Mu suddenly looked at him in unison. This scene was extremely strange and peculiar, but Qin Mu seemed to be able to control countless selves. Qin Mu walked in the strange spaces, but no matter how he walked, he would always be facing him and the countless him. This is the scene after the 16th universe was completely destroyed. The chaos is gathered at a point, and it looks like the Sea of Chaos, but it's actually an incomparably dense and strange point where countless spaces are squeezed together. Qin Mu's voice seemed to come from countless spaces, but no matter where it was, it entered his ears at the same time. The entire 17th epic universe will be born from here. Third senior brother, please take a look. Young Master Ling Xiao looked in the direction of his finger and saw Miluo Palace. He couldn't help being slightly stunned. Miluo Palace wasn't divided into countless parts like he was, but there was still only one. Teacher's primordial chaos runes are one, evolving from 1 to 10,000 paths. It can no longer be divided. Therefore, Miluo Palace is also one of life creation tribulation. Qin Mu said, Grand Senior Brother has inherited teacher's mantle, so he can also achieve this step. Senior Sister Wuji was the goddess of sinkhole, and she could also achieve this step by destroying the world and creating the world. They could all achieve this step in life creation tribulation. Of course, I can also achieve this step. Suddenly, countless Qin Mu vanished from the countless tiniest spaces and was replaced by the only Qin Mu. He appeared in front of all the young masters, walking back and forth in front of him. The other young masters have the ability to pass the destruction tribulation, but they are unable to pass the life creation tribulation because at the moment the life creation tribulation erupted, countless versions of themselves were destroyed by the countless life creation tribulations. Qin Mu's gaze landed on young Master Ling Xiao's face. He looked at the countless versions of himself, and these countless versions of yourself are actually the countless time sections of your future self in the 17th epoch. You have countless physical particles in your body. No matter which of these particles changes slightly, it will create a possibility in the future. Every physical particle has countless changes in the long 17th epoch, and countless physical particles have countless possibilities in the future. But all of this is included in the creation tribulation. Young Master Ling Xiao's mind was in an uproar. He saw countless of himself asking questions, some in shock and some in fear. They were him, but the future him was the countless of him after the changes in his body. The strangeness of the moment before life creation tribulation erupted was something he couldn't imagine. Third senior brother, if you can't withstand life creation tribulation, your countless futures will be destroyed by it, and you will naturally cease to exist. Life creation tribulation will completely wipe you out. Qin Mu said unhurriedly, your countless futures will become the nourishment of the 17th epoch. This is the reason why even Dao practitioners wouldn't be able to survive life creation tribulation. However, you have a glimmer of hope, which is to gather countless futures into one body, like teacher or supreme. Only in this way can you preserve your life in life creation tribulation. Young Master Ling Xiao heard countless of himself shouting angrily and asking questions. He saw countless of himself attacking, but he couldn't hurt Qin Mu in the slightest. Is this the scene teacher encountered when he was refining the world-crossing golden ship to ferry all living beings in the first epoch? He asked his own question amidst the clamor. However, Qin Mu seemed to have clearly caught this question from countless of his questions. At that time, teacher could only pass through the calamity of destruction, so he shouldn't have brought all living beings into the calamity of creation. In the calamity of destruction, all living beings of the first epoch had already turned into ashes. If he had encountered the calamity of creation, he would have been even more desperate. However, I feel that after all living beings were destroyed, teacher still encountered the calamity of creation, but he survived. In that short moment, he should be able to see the future. Young Master Ling Xiao let out a long sigh. Even though the abilities of the Master of Miluo Palace at that time were brilliant, they couldn't compare to the current him. Since teacher could pass life creation tribulation at that time, he definitely could too. Whether you can pass life creation tribulation doesn't depend on your abilities, but on whether you can gather the future together. Qin Mu seemed to have heard his thoughts. Senior brother, if you were me, you could even jump out of the creation tribulation and come straight after it. This is the path of chaos. If I'm not wrong, the reason why teacher's Dao heart died and returned to the path of the first epoch was because he saw the future of the entire 17th epoch before the destruction of the 16th epoch and the arrival of the creation tribulation of the 17th epoch. A future that made him incomparably hopeless. Young Master Ling Xiao's pupils constricted. Just now, he had caught a glimpse of all the future sections of the 17th epoch, but there were simply too many sections of the future. He couldn't see through the end of the 17th epoch. However, the master of Milieu Palace should be able to do it. This is the first time I've entered the creation tribulation, and it's also the first time I've encountered such a strange scene. I didn't have the time to see the future of the 17th epoch clearly, Qin Mu said dejectedly. However, teacher said that the future of the 17th epoch is the ultimate coldness. After 800 billion years, it will turn into an ice-cold void. There won't be any life and there won't be a next universe. Thinking about it, he must have seen the future of the 17th epoch, and that's why he's in despair. Aren't you in despair? Young Master Ling Xiao asked. Qin Mu shook his head. I don't believe that the future of the 17th epoch is already destined. Even if it's destined, I have to change it. Senior brother, teacher's path is wrong. Do you still want to continue walking down his path? Young Master Ling Xiao was silent as he gripped the Dao spear in his hand tighter and tighter. Junior brother, you said that my only way out is to be like eldest senior brother and teacher, gathering all the future into one body. I don't agree with that. He pursed his lips and revealed a smile. Apart from that, there's still a chance of survival. That's the dirtiness field of the ultimate void, that abandoned land. Qin Mu's expression sank and his pupils constricted. Life creation tribulation erupted. Suddenly, countless young masters Ling Xiao rose and stabbed out with their Dao spears at the same time, rushing toward the abandoned land that had yet to be destroyed by life creation tribulation. Qin Mu's sleeves trembled, and at the instant life creation tribulation erupted, he vanished from it. Whoosh! Qin Mu's figure appeared in the sky above the ancestral court of Jade Capital City. His wide sleeves trembled violently as he rushed into the ultimate void. In the dirtying grounds of the ultimate void, a huge skull was blown by the cold wind and crashed into a broken ship. Its head was hung by a broken long spear. That strange head was the one that Qin Mu had met when he first entered the dirtying grounds in his early years. The skull had obtained a thread of flesh and blood. After all these years, more flesh and blood had started to grow on the surface of the skull. It had grown eyes, and one could vaguely make out its face. Third young master Ling Xiao, who had escaped from life creation tribulation and had always been in a muddle-headed state. At that moment, third young master Ling Xiao disappeared from Jade Capital City, and he finally remembered his name and identity. All kinds of divine arts, paths, and skills poured into his mind. How old 7? The ancient memories awakened, and third young master Ling Xiao finally remembered himself. He remembered what he had encountered when Qin Mu had thrown him into the life creation tribulation of the 17th epoch. He fell into the life creation tribulation, and countless of him rushed toward the unclean field that had not been destroyed by the destruction tribulation. Only there would be a glimmer of hope. But just as countless of him rushed toward the unclean grounds, life creation tribulation also erupted. The power of life creation tribulation was unimaginable, and countless future selves in countless spaces suddenly exploded, as if they had experienced the creation of the universe. They turned into 5 suns and expanded into space, and their bodies and Tao vanished. Countless future selves tried their best to resist life creation tribulation, and he unleashed the divine arts, paths, and skills of Mycroft Palace to the extreme. However, even with young master's strength, it was useless in the face of this unimaginable calamity. Only then did he know the difference between him and the master of Milieu Palace, Grand Supreme Wuji, and even Qin Mu. This difference wasn't the difference in cultivation, but the difference in their paths and understanding of the Tao. Life creation disaster had beheaded an unknown amount of his future. He even suspected that he would be destroyed by life creation disaster in the billions or even tens of billions of years. This was extremely terrifying. In that life creation tribulation, he only had time to escape into the unclean field with his head. It has already been 9.5 billion years since life creation tribulation, so the injuries I received in it should be over. Third young master Ling Xiao's head regained its memories and immediately began to grow flesh and blood. In the past, he only had his head left and was floating in the unclean field, muddle-headed. He was only acting on instinct and didn't know how to recover his corporeal body. It was only when Qin Mu was sealed in the pagoda formed from absolute beginning's flesh and blood and flew into the filthy field that Ling Xiao's head obtained a thread of flesh and blood. The strangest thing about this matter was that the Flesh and Blood Pagoda was formed from Absolute Beginning's flesh and blood, but it was third young master Ling Xiao who had controlled Absolute Beginning's corporeal body at that time. Furthermore, the divine art contained in the Flesh and Blood Pagoda was another great divine art that Ling Xiao had created to counter the weaknesses of Qin Mu's techniques and divine arts, Miluopath transformation. In the end, Ling Xiao's skull in the pickling grounds obtained a thread of flesh from the Flesh Pagoda, which allowed him to be resurrected. The circulation in this was worth pondering over. Young Master Ling Xiao tried his best to recover his corporeal body. This corporeal body was actually the flesh and blood of ancient God, Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning plus his skull. However, in life creation tribulation, all the spirituality in his skull had been wiped away by life creation tribulation. Thus, he could only borrow Absolute Beginning's flesh and blood to restore his physical body. Fortunately, Absolute Beginning's physical body was also extremely powerful. Although Absolute Beginning was unable to cultivate his physical body to the extreme, young Master Ling Xiao was able to. From the looks of it now, the life creation tribulation only wiped away 9.5 billion years of my future. Young Master Ling Xiao's head was growing rapidly. His neck was growing under his head. He could sense his own Dao spear. The Dao spear was stuck in his head. It should have been destroyed by the life creation tribulation when they fell into the unclean field together. Its power was greatly reduced. The future after 9.5 billion years has not been destroyed by the life creation tribulation. I am resurrected at this moment. In the 17th epoch in the future, I still have an infinite amount of time. I still won this battle. He grew ribs and arms. As long as he recovered his physical body, even if it was an Absolute Beginning body, he would be able to train this body to an extremely high level in a very short period of time. Even if it wasn't as good as his original body, it wasn't far from it. What he lacked now was the cultivation base that had been destroyed by the creation tribulation. However, with his abilities he could cultivate to the peak in a few years. Beside him was a broken ship. Young Master Ling Xiao's pupils constricted. He didn't know what had smashed this broken ship into two pieces. The other part had disappeared, leaving only half of the ship. He looked at this ship, but couldn't remember its origins. He remembered that when he was only left with a skull, there were Tao practitioners withered bones fighting with him for flesh and blood on the broken ship. They tore a large piece of Absolute Beginning flesh off his face and stuck it to the withered bones, but the Tao practitioners' withered bones cultivation was obviously much lower than his, so they couldn't protect the flesh and blood. This ship isn't Teacher's world-crossing golden ship. The Tao practitioners on this ship are also extremely strong. Where did they come from? Young Master Ling Xiao frowned. This ship gave him a familiar feeling. There were many dried bones of Tao practitioners hidden in the cabin, and they were locked inside. Their abilities were extremely tyrannical when they were alive, and even though they weren't as strong as Young Master, their abilities were unfathomable. There weren't many forces with so many strong practitioners in the past 16 universe eras. It's not good to stay here for long. Old Seven will definitely pay attention to this place. If I stay any longer, there will be a hint of danger. Even though he could quickly recover his corporeal body, he was still not strong enough to fight against Qin Mu. He had to hide for a few years and recover to his peak condition before he could defeat Qin Mu. Young Master Ling Xiao stretched out his hand and the rusted Dao spear flew up and landed in his huge skeletal hand. Young Master Ling Xiao held his spear and flew in the air. His corporeal body flew in the pickled field as his flesh and blood continued to grow. Soon his upper body completely grew out and the bones in his legs grew. Young Master Ling Xiao could finally walk and couldn't help letting out a long sigh. With his legs he could fight and walk, increasing his speed greatly. At this moment, his expression changed slightly as he saw the forest of obelisks left behind by the great young master's supreme suppression of the enemies of Miluo Palace. The door of the forest of obelisks was shattered by Qin Mu, and the forest of obelisks appeared behind the door. A powerful suppressive force came from the forest of obelisks and one could faintly see a Dao tree with 12 Dao fruits hanging there. Great change. Or should I say heaven's capital? He's hiding here. Young Master Ling Xiao left. In that case, the members of Heaven Cleaving Society who sneaked here should also be here. They were suppressed by great change, so it's no wonder they haven't been seen for 3.5 billion years. I need a few years to recover. If these members of Heaven Cleaving Society can break free, I can help Miluo Palace. After all, he needed a few years to heal his injuries, and this period of time was enough for Qin Mu and Eternal Peace to uproot the forces of Miluo Palace. If they broke free, Qin Mu wouldn't be able to help Eternal Peace to destroy Miluo Palace, but if they did so, Qin Mu would only be able to extinguish fire everywhere and wouldn't have the time to destroy Miluo Palace. He also wouldn't have the time to search for his whereabouts. However, how could he let Heaven Cleaving Society break free? Not long after, young Master Ling Xiao revealed a hint of joy. He had seen the land of Heaven Cleaving. The ruins of Heaven Capital City appeared in front of him, and the land of Heaven Cleaving was there. If he could send the land of Heaven Cleaving Society into the Forest of Obelisks, the abilities of Heaven Cleaving Society would increase greatly, and they would be able to destroy the Forest of Obelisks in one go. Young Master Ling Xiao composed himself and walked into the Sky City ruins. At this moment, a voice came from behind him. Third senior brother, do you know the consequences of using the Sky City ruins to attack the Obelisk Forest? Young Master Ling Xiao's body stiffened. He stopped and gripped the rusted Dao spear tightly. In the past universe era, young Master Grand Supreme captured those vicious and evil people and suppressed them in this filthy area. Many of them had already died in the life creation tribulations time and time again. However, there were still some people who didn't die and were still suppressed in the forest of stone tablets. Behind him, Qin Mu's figure slowly appeared and walked over. The corporeal body of Heaven Capital City is also suppressed there. Even after experiencing 10 destruction tribulations and 11 creation tribulations, it still doesn't change. Great change is guarding that place and transforming into an obelisk to suppress the heavens. At the same time, he is also suppressing his corporeal body from his past life. If you use the ruins of Heaven Capital City to ram into the Forest of Steels, you will release a great terror. Young Master Ling Xiao only felt that he was locked onto by Qin Mu's qi dynamic and didn't dare to make any movements. Qin Mu came to his side and looked at the land of Heaven Cleaving Masses in the ruins of Heaven Capital City. Heaven Cleaving Masses will be released, great change will become Heaven Capital, and the devils suppressed by Supreme will come out in full force. The entire universe of the 17th epoch will be plunged into misery, and it might even be destroyed because of this. Third senior brother, is this the philosophy of teacher that you have inherited? Or is it that you are unscrupulous in order to win? Young Master Ling Xiao's grip on Dao spear became tighter and tighter as he said coldly, I can do things that teacher can't do. In order to achieve teacher's philosophy, there must be sacrifices. Qin Mu turned his head around and faced him. Sacrifice? The sacrifice on the sacrificial altar was a sacrifice, but the person who made this sacrifice was never you. When you were unscrupulous, you had already completely abandoned teacher's ideals. You used the blood sacrifice to make the people of Miluo Palace descend, so what's the difference between you and the people of Heaven Cleaving Open? Young Master Ling Xiao shook his Dao spear and the residual power of the Dao spear burst forth, cutting off Qin Mu's qi dynamic that was locked onto him. Young Master Ling Xiao immediately took a step back, and his aura rose rapidly. He sneered, Little junior brother, after teacher's Dao heart died and was destroyed, Miluo Palace had already collapsed. Grand Supreme doesn't care about the affairs of the world, Wuji's crimes are suppressed. Fourth brother is obsessed with personal love, fifth brother and sixth brother are missing, and you are still stirring up trouble everywhere. Only I can be the backbone of Miluo Palace, and only I can support Miluo Palace and inherit teacher's ideals. What right do you have to criticize me? His aura became stronger and stronger as his great Dao awakened rapidly. He said coldly, Without me, Miluo Palace would have long been reduced to ashes. If the Dao practitioners of Miluo Palace left Miluo Palace, they would only commit more and greater sins. That's why I want to destroy Miluo Palace. Qin Mu took a step forward and said coldly, Miluo Palace is to save all lives. If it can't save all lives, it shouldn't continue to exist. Young Master Ling Xiao was furious. So you must destroy Miluo Palace and destroy teacher's orthodoxy? That's right. Qin Mu's killing intent surged into the sky. I want to destroy Miluo Palace and destroy teacher's orthodoxy. His last disciple will correct his mistakes. If you persist in not coming to your senses, It's also a mistake and needs to be corrected. Young Master Ling Zhao's path spear suddenly stabbed into the ruins of Heaven Capital City. As long as he exerted his strength, he would be able to pierce through the ruins and smash into the forest of obelisks. When the two great ruins collided, the remnant power of heaven and earth was stimulated, and could destroy the forest of obelisks, and release the cancer of the past 16 universe eras. You can't kill me, young Master Ling Zhao said word by word. Life creation tribulation has already destroyed my past 9.5 billion years of history, but in the future I still have endless time. Little junior brother, I've won this battle in the end. Qin Mu's gaze was strange as he shook his head. All of your future has already been wiped out by life creation tribulation. Third senior brother, there are countless futures, and you only have the present you to escape. You only have this short period of time left. Young Master Ling Zhao's pupils constricted as he tried his best to stir up the ruins of Heaven Capital City. The Tao spear bent, and with a violent flick, Heaven Capital City whistled up into the sky. The air of chaos in this ruin was dense, heavy and vast. However, even such a sacred ground was unable to block young Master Ling Zhao's astonishing strength. Qin Mu raised his foot and stomped heavily, and the ruins of Heaven Capital City that flew towards the forest of steels instantly sank and rose up like fallen leaves floating in the air. Young Master Ling Zhao's killing intent was overflowing as he landed in Heaven Capital City. Even though he had just recovered his corporeal body, Qin Mu wasn't having it easy either. The Tao injury that fourth young Master Zi Xiao had left on Qin Mu wasn't something that could be healed in a short period of time. The moment the Tao spear in his hand made a move, it was his most formidable killing move. The Tao spear was like a forest, like a prison. Young Master Ling Xiao abhorred evil as if it was his revenge. The unique treasure he had left in Jade Capital City was the prison, used to suppress and refine the enemies that were against Miluo Palace. He was not as kind as the eldest young master, the Grand Supreme. The Grand Supreme would not kill his opponent. Even when faced with a great evil like Tai Yi, the Grand Supreme would only suppress him in the Tao burial coffin and suppress him. Young Master Ling Zhao's great prison was covered in a dense forest of Tao spears. The forest of Tao spears pierced through the bodies of the prisoners, their primordial spirits, and continued to torture them until the other party could not take it anymore and died. From his prison, one could also see the tyranny and ferocity of his techniques and divine arts. The divine arts contained in his Tao spear were the most tyrannical divine arts. The moment the spear was shot out, the entire sky was filled with holiness that surrounded his Tao spear, increasing his battle prowess explosively. Qin Mu retreated and countless spear shadows flew past him. Young Master Ling Zhao's momentum became stronger and stronger as he closed in at a rapid speed. His spear was like a dragon changing into all kinds of forms. The voices of gods and devils filled the sky, reinforcing his power. It made the power of his Tao spear even more terrifying. The ruins of Heaven Capital City exploded and shattered under the power of the Tao spear, turning into Qi of Chaos. The Qi of Chaos in the ruins became denser and denser, and there were even billowing Qi of Chaos surging out from the depths of space and time. There seemed to be tall and strange figures standing there in the fog, and their shadows couldn't be seen clearly. Young Master Ling Xiao turned a blind eye, and the tip of the spear didn't leave Qin Mu's left and right, slaughtering its way into the depths of the ruins. Suddenly, Qin Mu's figure stopped, and his legs landed in the center of the sacrificial altar of heaven-cleaving land, right in the middle of the footprints. Young Master Ling Zhao's heart jumped. Heaven's capital, heaven-cleaving land. He knew that something was wrong, so he immediately gathered all his strength to stab out with the last strike. At the same time, he let go of his spear and retreated. At that moment, Qin Mu stretched out his hand to pull out his sword, and sword light lit up. Heaven cleaving heaven chapter. Boom! Chaos was cleaved open, and a new universe was born in the sword light. Wherever the sword light passed, the tall and strange figures in the chaos fog dispersed like smoke and clouds. Third senior brother, this is the life creation tribulation that you have avoided, and I will return it to you now. Qin Mu's Tao voice exploded, and sword light went up to the Tao spear that young Master Ling Xiao had stabbed over. The gods and devils that were revolving around the Tao spear exploded one after another. Crack! The Tao spear was cut and shattered, turning into pure energy that expanded. Following that, it underwent the transformation of innate fifth supreme in the light of creation. Young Master Ling Xiao retreated extremely quickly, but the speed of the universe opening was even faster. It soon caught up to him and swallowed him. In the light of creation, young Master Ling Xiao recalled the scene of him escaping in the 17th epoc's life creation tribulation. Countless of himself tried their best to thrust out their strongest attacks, breaking through one after another of the extremely strange spaces and rushing towards the void. At that time, countless of himself were destroyed in the life creation tribulation, but he was the only one who broke through the light of the life creation tribulation. His physical body was shattered in the light of the life creation tribulation, and his Tao spear flipped, rushing into the void with his head. He didn't know when he was the one who had broken through life creation tribulation and when he was the one who had been destroyed. At that time, he had turned back to look and saw the light of calamity of life creation tribulation being left behind him. Now, he had turned back to look at the light of calamity of Qin Mu's heaven-opening writings, and saw that the light of calamity of life creation tribulation was still chasing after him for 9.5 billion years. At that moment, the calamity light was already close at hand. He had never escaped the calamity light of life creation tribulation. He had only escaped far away and life creation tribulation hadn't caught up to him. But now, life creation tribulation had already caught up to him. What was different was that life creation tribulation had used Qin Mu's hand to swallow him, drown him, and wipe him out. Thinking about it, everyone in the void hadn't escaped life creation tribulation. It was just that they hadn't been caught up by it yet. By the time the hidden experts were caught up by their own life creation tribulations, it would still be difficult for them to escape death. This battle, the defeat is not mine, but the will of heaven. Young Master Ling Xiao had no way of resisting the tribulation light. His physical body was destroyed by the tribulation light. However, he mustered the last of his strength and rammed into the ruins of the heavenly capital, using the last of his strength to push the ruins into the obelisk forest. He had to buy time for the palace masters and Tao practitioners of the Miluo Palace. He had to buy hope for the survival of Jade Capital. He could die, but the concept of the Miluo Palace had to be preserved and passed on. Even if the credit was not with him, even if he died and his Tao was destroyed. The ruins of heaven's capital rammed into the forest of obelisks at an even faster speed. They were getting closer and closer to the forest of obelisks. In the light of calamity, young Master Ling Xiao saw that the ruins of heaven's capital were already within reach of the forest of obelisks. His corporeal body, his great Tao, and his thoughts and consciousness also dissipated in the light of calamity. All that was left was his head, and the flesh and blood on his head also rapidly disintegrated. Soon, his skull also disintegrated in the light of calamity, but he felt a hint of relief. With the heavens being released, the practitioners of Mycroft Palace will have a chance to survive. This is the last thing I can do. There will always be someone who will pick up the ideals of Mycroft Palace and pick up my thoughts to help me move forward. His consciousness was annihilated, and at the instant before it was annihilated, he saw Qin Mu blocking the path between the ruins of Heaven Capital City and the forest of obelisks. He saw Qin Mu's hair standing on end, and countless arms flying up and down, blocking the ruins of Heaven Capital City and the forest of obelisks respectively. He was using his corporeal body to withstand the collision of the two great sacred grounds. He saw Qin Mu's arms exploding under the pressure of the boundless power, and his flesh and blood splattered everywhere. He saw Qin Mu being squeezed until he vomited blood, but he also saw Qin Mu continuously growing new arms, putting his life on the line to block the two great sacred grounds. Finally, the ruins of Heaven Capital City trembled slightly and stopped. The forest of obelisks was pushed away by Qin Mu's power, and was getting farther and farther away from the ruins of Heaven Capital City. King 7th. Young Master Ling Xiao's consciousness moved and was completely annihilated. Qin Mu lay in front of the entrance of the forest of obelisks and spat out large mouthfuls of blood. His 3 eyes were pitch black and he couldn't see anything for a long time. The great Tao he had cultivated was almost crushed to pieces, and his corporeal body was even more miserable. There were wounds everywhere, and there were even broken bones piercing through his skin. After a long time, he felt something flowing into his mouth and down his throat. flowing to all parts of his corporeal body and primordial spirit to nourish his body. His injuries were slightly better, and cool liquid dripped into his eyes. After a moment, his vision slowly recovered, and the scenery in front of him gradually became clear. Qin Mu saw a few figures, and after a moment they overlapped. It was an ordinary-looking old man sitting by the door frame of the forest of obelisks. Qin Mu struggled to get up and greeted the old man. Grand Supreme Senior Brother. Eldest Young Master waved his hand. Ling Xiao is dead, Zizhao's Dao heart is broken, and Miluo Palace no longer has a backbone. Seventh Brother, your goal has been achieved. Next, are you going to Jade Capital City to destroy all Dao practitioners and hall masters? Qin Mu sat down beside him with his elbows on his knees. He was panting heavily, and his hands were still trembling. Big Senior Brother, things like life are stronger than we imagined, and also weaker than we imagined. Qin Mu smiled, he chuckled. 3.5 billion years, just 3.5 billion years, eternal peace reform has already reached its end. U.S. practitioners of eternal peace are fighting to the death in the ancestral court. So eternal peace has no worries and no motivation to improve. Eternal peace has no enemies anymore. I used to hate Carefree Village established by founding Emperor Qin Yi, but eternal peace is being transformed by U.S. practitioners into another Carefree Village, a bigger Carefree Village. He stretched his waist with difficulty and his spine crackled. And this universe is still growing, becoming bigger and bigger, becoming wider and wider. The heavens are moving away from each other, and the stars are moving farther and farther apart. This is a calamity that is even more terrifying than the destruction and creation tribulations. Eternal peace will be slowly killed in the gentle village. When they realize the danger, they will no longer be able to stop this universe from becoming void. I feel that they need some enemies to warn them so that they can continue to reform and become stronger and stronger. Grand Supreme glanced at him and said, "That's why you will leave behind the Taoists and hall masters of Miluo Palace to motivate and spur them to continue moving forward." Qin Mu's expression was calm. "I need to leave behind another possibility for the future. Perhaps teacher's idea is right." His gaze was faint. "I didn't kill old man Wuya or second sister Wuji either. If the entire universe grows infinitely, they might have the means to stop the trend of turning into void." Grand Supreme looked at him and suddenly asked, "Are you prepared to go back?" Qin Mu nodded. He revealed a smile. "I'm prepared to go back to see teacher, to become the seventh brother of Miluo Palace, to find my daughter. I will do many things in the past, even more than what I did in the 17th epoch. I will look for the possibility of avoiding the great nirvana in the future." Young Master's expression was strange. "When you return to the past, you will indeed do many things. What you do is incomprehensible. At the very least, I have never understood it. Your reputation will not be very good. I'm used to it." Qin Mu stood up unsteadily and stretched his back. He smiled. "Seventh Young Master, if you were to be seen through with a glance, would you still be worthy of the title of Chaos?" Young Master's Grand Supreme stood up. "You said that if I learned from teacher, I wouldn't be like him no matter what. Even if I were to enter destruction and transform into Dao and die like teacher, I would still be a complete mess. I think I probably didn't despair about the future like teacher. I didn't know where this hope came from, but now I know that this glimmer of hope should have come from you." His gaze was faint as he said, "After you return to the past, I will come to the 17th epoch to transform into Dao and return the spirit energy that seized the universe to the universe. However, I won't die. I will reincarnate and wait for you in the 17th epoch." Qin Mu nodded. Young Master Grand Supreme turned back to look at the forest of obelisks and said, "Great change in splitting the heavens. I will send them back before transforming into the path. When you return to the 16th epoch, you will meet them." Qin Mu was stunned and smiled. "In that case, Senior Brother, we will meet again in the future." Young Master Grand Supreme smiled. "We will meet again in the past." Young Master Grand Supreme watched Qin Mu leave and entered the forest of obelisks. In the forest of obelisks, Tai sat there, and the Dao fruits on the Dao tree behind him shone brilliantly. Grand Supreme bowed to greet him, and Tai stood up to return the greeting. "Fellow Daoist, I've already discussed with 7th Young Master to send you back to the 16th epoch with the members of Heaven Cleaving Society," Grand Supreme said. If fellow Taoist and the members of Heaven-Cleaving Society were still here, Seventh Young Master would probably have evil thoughts in his heart. He would definitely kill the Splitting Open Heavens faction and allow fellow Taoists to be reincarnated. Although the Splitting Open Heavens faction has done many evil deeds, it is also a possibility to save the future. However, the harm caused by the Splitting Open Heavens faction is too great. I'm afraid that he will not let you off, Tai said. Eldest Young Master is feeling guilty because of the matter of the owner of the Palace of Ilua killing the heavenly capital back then. Hence, he wants to compensate me and the Splitting Open Heavens faction. The eldest Young Master shook his head. If teacher had not killed Tiandu back then, the members of the Heaven Opening Society would still have become the members of the Heaven Opening Society. It would not have changed because of this. The members of the Heaven Opening Society in Tiandu City possessed the power to split the heavens and earth. They did not control themselves and abused this power. In comparison, the Ilua Palace is more orderly and less harmful. *T. From the obelisks, the faces of the members of the Heaven Opening Society appeared. They all scolded the eldest Young Master for his stinky words. Those heaven-cleaving masses were cursing and ridiculing the Miluo Palace for using their power to bully others. If Heaven Capital City was given time to grow, 10 of the masters of the Miluo Palace would also be killed by the master of Heaven Capital City, and 10 of the Miluo Palace would also be flattened. The master of the Miluo Palace was jealous of their power, so he killed the master of Heaven Capital City before they could grow up. The heaven-cleaving masses ridiculed the master of the Miluo Palace for having no tolerance for others. If it were them, they would have long solved the destruction and creation of the universe, creating a perfect world. They also ridiculed the Miluo Palace master for his incompetence and for exhausting his Tao heart to the point of death. He deserved to die. Young Master Tai did not mind. Tai frowned. He was also helpless against these heaven-cleaving masses. He said, "How are you going to send us back to the 16th epoch? I will transform into the Tao and return all my strength to the universe." Just as Tai said this, the heaven-cleaving masses laughed again. One after another they said, "Young Master Tai, this loser is going to be like that old scoundrel, the Miluo Palace master. His Tao heart is dead." The Prime Minister continued, "It's useless to keep my Tao tree. So, I plan to borrow your axe to chop off my Tao tree, and make a ship to send you to the 16th epoch." 1. The crowd was suppressed in the stone tablet and laughed out loud. "Prime Minister, old bastard, won't your Tao tree benefit us? If you have the ability, then leave your Tao fruit for us to use as a sacrifice. With your ability you can trap us? Wait until we are free from your Tao ship, then we will kill our way to the 17th epoch and heal your dead head." Tai said, "I will build a Tao ship and send you to the 16th epoch. However, before that, the 7th Young Master must return to the past and become the 7th Young Master. Otherwise, I wouldn't dare send you back." Tai said, "Are you afraid that he will go back on his words and kill all the people who split the heavens when you reincarnate?" Grand Supreme said, "7th Young Master has killed quite a number of people in the past 16 universe eras. His style makes it hard for people to be at ease. I have to see him return to the past before I can be at ease." Tai nodded. "Me too." The two of them sat down and waited quietly. Qin Mu walked slowly and first went to the original site of the ancestral court. It had already become a battlefield for Tao practitioners. The primordial cauldron of the ancestral court had been riddled with holes by young masters' unique treasures, and the unique treasures of the few young masters had all been destroyed. Only great young masters' supreme heaven's well was left. The hall master and Tao practitioners of Miluo Palace switched from offense to defense and defended heavenly well, making it impossible for Lan Yutian, Su Shanghua, and the rest to break through. Qin Mu looked at the battlefield from afar before floating away. He strolled through the starry sky and went to the 4 poles heaven. The 4 poles of the universe had become even larger, and there were all kinds of races living here. The 4 poles heaven had long become unfamiliar to him. When he came to South Heaven from South Pole Heaven, he saw that the heavens here were like little eternal peace. Everything seemed to be in order, and the gods were in charge of power. They used their power to serve the mortals, and their commerce flourished. All kinds of resources were provided to the gods. Qin Mu walked through the heavens, and there weren't many people who knew him anymore. 3.5 billion years of history made everything extremely unfamiliar. He walked past the ruins of the battlefield and stood there to remember the heroic spirits who had died in the past. He even looked for the graves of his enemies, but unfortunately he couldn't find them. It had been too long, and the people of the world had already forgotten him. They had forgotten the people who had fought for the future. They might not understand what the people of the past had fought for or why they had died. They might not understand the people who had risked their lives and shed their blood in the era of 5 tribulations. In fact, they didn't even have the interest to understand the history of the era of 5 tribulations. Long Han, Qi Ming, High Emperor, Founding Emperor, Eternal Peace, generation after generation of people's struggles were stained with dust just like that. Not many people brushed away the dust and read the dust-covered pages. Qin Mu was filled with melancholy as he finally came to Origin World. Origin World was bigger and heavier than when he had left. The Ancestral Court no longer existed and had become a heavy weapon. Origin World replaced the Ancestral Court and became the center of all the worlds in the universe. Eternal Peace's heavenly court was built here, and the origin wood on Gong Sun Fu's main body had also become lush and green. The little girl who had treated him like a tree that needed watering back then had become the symbol of Origin World. Qin Mu was like a mortal as he walked around the cities of the Origin World, observing and experiencing the lives of the people. The Origin World had become completely unfamiliar. The economy of the world had become very different from when he had left. The culture and customs had also become so unfamiliar that they were out of place. The architectural styles of the god cities made him feel as if he had come to a foreign world. The clothes, food, language, and even runes of the people had also become different from before. He was like an old antique that had been dug out from an ancient tomb and had nothing in common with this world. Qin Mu was slightly terrified and confused. He wanted to see if the concept that he had put into practice was still there. He saw that the gods were used by the people, and he also saw that the path of the saints was used by the people. The concept was still there, but what made him confused was, regardless of whether it was gods or humans, they were all used to this. They didn't understand the meaning of this kind of normality, nor did they know how many bloody battles were hidden within, or how many people had paid the price with their lives. After all, 1,000,000 years of history was too short compared to 3.5 billion years of peace. 1,000,000 years of history and 3.5 billion years might just be a page in a thick history book. This page couldn't put down the 7 celestial venerables of Long Han, the Red Emperor, and the Bright Emperor. There was no place for Heavenly Venerate Yu and Heavenly Venerate Ling, who had supported the era of High Emperor. There was also no place for the dozen or so High Emperors who had stood tall and declared that the lives of humans were greater than the heavens. There was no place for Carefree Village, Founding Emperor, his 4 great heavenly kings, great ruins, and first ancestor human emperor in the book. The Qin Mu in this history book might only be a short paragraph of words, not to mention the battles and faces that he couldn't forget. The history books of the world couldn't remember these things. The heroes that were buried by history were like water droplets in the sea or sand in the desert. No one could remember them. Even if the heroes in history returned, no one would recognize them. He walked for a long time and passed by the god cities. Some of the ruins of the battlefield had been destroyed in time and turned into god cities, high-rise buildings, and some were completely deserted with no one to remember them. Only when he passed by, he paid his respects. Heavenly Venerate Mu, is that you? When Qin Mu was reminiscing in Lanfeng Valley, he heard an ancient voice. He looked over and saw a huge black tiger. He was stunned and revealed a smile as he welcomed the huge black tiger that pounced over. It was the Black Tiger God, his senior brother. The Black Tiger God pounced over and transformed into an old man with a face full of grizzled white beard. He hugged him and cried and laughed. Suddenly he shouted loudly, "Old Master, your second disciple is back." There were a few grass huts in the mountain forests of Lanfeng Valley. Saint Woodcutter pushed open the door of the grass hut and walked out. It was still the same decoration as before, and had never changed with the changes of the world. He was also like an old antique, unchanging from time to time, so old that he was abandoned by the times. Even though his appearance was the same as back then, he was like a mature dandelion with less and less hair. Qin Mu strode forward and hugged the somewhat reserved Saint Woodcutter. Saint Woodcutter struggled for a moment but was unable to break free. Instead, He executed the axe that had long since rusted at the corner of the wall to threaten Qinmu to let go of him. However, the black tiger god secretly stretched out his claws and pressed down on him. Qinmu finally let go of him. The two of them sat down in front of the stone table. Saint Woodcutter's face was dark while the black tiger god busied himself in front and behind, preparing tea, stir-frying, and cooking. He was very diligent. After a long while, Saint Woodcutter said coldly, "You're back." "Yes, I'm back," Qinmu said with a smile. "When are you leaving?" Saint Woodcutter raised his teacup and asked indifferently. "Right away," Qinmu said. Saint Woodcutter's palm trembled, and the water in the teacup almost spilled out. He asked indifferently, "You want to leave right after coming back?" Qinmu didn't reply. He looked around and saw that the architectural style from 3.5 billion years ago was still maintained. He shook his head and asked, "Why does teacher live here?" "Teacher has made great contributions to eternal peace. Wouldn't it be better if he went to heavenly court? Furthermore, there are old friends there, isn't it very lively? Why is there a need to be so poor?" Saint Woodcutter drank his tea and said indifferently, "Supreme Saint has no name, you don't understand my realm." Qinmu laughed out loud. He could see that Saint Woodcutter's cultivation realm was still stuck in front of God execution stage, and had yet to ascend it. Logically speaking, eternal peace reform had created countless paths of postnatal realm, and there were many people with outstanding wisdom who had verified these paths of postnatal realm to the level of Tao attainment. If Saint Woodcutter wanted to learn, he could completely complete his 360 paths of postnatal realm and cultivate every great Tao to the peak level. However, he didn't learn it. "I don't want to go to those places. It's too lively and noisy." Saint Woodcutter glared at him. "My abilities aren't high, so what's the use of going there and being worshipped as a god statue in the temple? I'm a living person, not a god statue made of wood and clay. If I were there, it would be better for me to live in seclusion here." Qinmu stretched out his hand to touch his dandelion-like head that had turned into the wind, but when Saint Woodcutter glared at him again, he immediately retracted his hand. "My 3 disciples, apart from the boss, are all doing better than me." The black tiger god took the hat, which was a new era style. Saint Woodcutter had originally been unwilling to wear the hat, but he was afraid that Qinmu would touch his head, so he had no choice but to put it on first. The people of today are also more thoughtful than us back then. It's just that they don't have any sense of worry, so I'm not comfortable with them. They always think I'm naggy and say I'm worrying over nothing, that I'm always worried about that unnecessary danger. I can't stay with those young people any longer. Qinmu had a smile on his face as he listened to him blabbering on about the youth of the new era. He felt a little sad in his heart. Teacher's mentality is probably really old. Saint Woodcutter said a lot and the food on the stone table gradually dwindled. They put down their bowls and chopsticks and Saint Woodcutter suddenly asked, "How long will you be gone for this time?" Qinmu smiled. "I don't know. Maybe I'll come back right after I leave. Or maybe I'll only come back when this universe becomes void. Or maybe I'll never come back once I go." Saint Woodcutter was silent. Qinmu roused his spirit. Teacher's awareness of danger will be useful. Carefree Village was just a pool of stagnant water. It would die slowly sooner or later, and new dangers would appear. At that time, Teacher would probably come out of the mountain to show his ambition. Veterans will not die. They only pick up their battle axes and weapons and place them in the corners of the walls to rust. People only choose to temporarily forget about them. But when the war comes again, people will remember them again, and they will also sharpen their battle axes and weapons and go to the battlefield again. He stood up. "Teacher, you will have a place to use them." Saint Woodcutter stood up and looked at him. "When will you return?" Qinmu was silent for a moment before suddenly asking, "Teacher, do you still remember the chaotic space?" Saint Woodcutter thought for a moment and asked, "The chaotic space in the floating space realm back then?" Qinmu said, "One day in the future, the chaotic space will bloom like fireworks, and that will be the sign of my return." Saint Woodcutter didn't stop him and watched him leave. When his figure disappeared into the mountains of Lanfeng Valley, he retracted his gaze and shouted, "Little Black, come out and sharpen your axe." The black tiger god immediately ran forward and said, "Old master, is there really a war happening? It has already been peaceful for billions of years." Saint Woodcutter raised his huge axe and said in a deep voice, "Be prepared. Sharpen your axe well. Let's go find our old friends." His voice was loud and clear, and there was a silent fighting spirit burning in his body, as well as a boiling blood. Wuxia has reincarnated. Yanyangxi has been lovey-dovey with him every day, so we have to take him out for a walk. And that Dishir Tian, what was his reincarnated name? Oh right, Tian Shu went to the ancestral court, right? Find him. Do you still know where that fellow from Cold Pond went? And that fellow from the Green Wilderness? Oh right, and the two fish from Cold Pond. Master, you forgot that the Heaven Master from the Cold Pond died, the Black Tiger God said carefully. Saint Woodcutter was at a loss. Didn't he reincarnate? The Black Tiger God said. Master, he was beaten into chaos during the Battle of the Heaven Court. You've been looking for him for many years. And Emperor Green, he also died. You forgot the cenotaph you built for them here. Last year, when you visited the grave, you asked whose grave it was. Saint Woodcutter was silent for a moment, then said in a muffled voice, "Then we won't look for them." Qin Mu walked slowly in eternal peace and approached the heavenly court of eternal peace. Gradually, there were people who knew him. Not everyone had forgotten him, but those who knew him were all old friends from the past. The occasional small talk made his footsteps slow down. These friends had not attained Tao yet, and they stayed in eternal peace. Some of them had gone into seclusion while others were still in society. Seeing them made Qin Mu sigh with emotion. His arrival didn't cause any waves in eternal peace. No one knew the background of this youth who walked in the bustling city with white hair on his temples. They only saw old seniors with long reputations coming to welcome him, and there were also travel-worn swordsmen rushing over. Some of these people were world-famous and were old ancestors who lived in temples, while some were unknown and unknown. Qin Mu didn't stay any longer. He still had to meet the others. Eternal Peace went to the capital and went to the capital, but their appearances also changed, making his interest wane. Night came, and Eternal Peace's night was enchanting. Divine lights lit up from the god cities, and the people here didn't have to worry about the invasion of darkness anymore. The light from the god cities made the moon in the sky become much dimmer. Qin Mu raised his head, and the moon in the sky was still as bright and clean as before. It only seemed distant and cold. He came to the moon, and there was a goddess dancing with a sword in the moon palace. The sword lights were like the moonlight in a dream, shining all over the moon palace. Qin Mu stood by the side and watched quietly. After a long while, the goddess in the moon palace put away her sword, and only then did she see him. The two of them stood there silently for a long time before looking at each other and smiling. 3.5 billion years was too long, so the relationship between them was no longer the love between a man and a woman. It was more like a kind of sustenance. It had nothing to do with the soul and the flesh, and it had nothing to do with desire and possession. It was just a kind of sustenance in the soul. This sustenance turned into a kind of yearning. The yearning converged into a shallow harbor that could be moored temporarily. There was no wind or waves, no waves. It was peaceful and beautiful. Qin Mu and Bai Chuer sat on the stone steps of the moon palace. They had once had intense emotions that were as intense as fire. Back then they had controlled sword lights to tear through the night sky and swim in the fake sky. Stirring up the brilliant stars, they had made the galaxy tremble for them. They were moved by each other. And even Eternal Peace's heavenly curtain couldn't hide it. At that time they had the possibility of being together, but they had been delayed because of all sorts of things. Now that they were together again, the ancient divine consciousness surged forth, stirring up ripples. Love sublimated and became a sustenance. It had nothing to do with lust or the future. It had nothing to do with feelings. They talked and smiled, enjoying the beauty and peace. After a long while, Qin Mu got up. Bai Chuer smiled and asked, "Will we meet again?" "We will, as long as you wait for me." Bai Chuer watched him leave. The moonlight was hazy, carrying the lead of time. It was heavy yet relaxed. The sun rose and the moon of eternal peace became thin, hiding behind the clouds. Qin Mu saw Lang Bao on a ferry. After his reincarnation, Lang Bao didn't have the face of his previous life. Through the porthole, Qin Mu looked at the woman who had once made him dream of her. He could see her soul, the experiences of her life, and all the things in her previous life. Lang Bao seemed to have sensed his gaze and turned his head to look at him through the porthole. Langer smiled and walked past the porthole. "Brother, have we met before? You give me a familiar feeling." She was graceful, and even though she didn't have the appearance of her previous life, she still had that extraordinary aura. Qin Mu shook his head and said with a smile, "We have never met before and only feel that we are familiar. We are probably old friends from my previous life." Lang Bao pondered over it and said, "I also have this kind of familiar feeling. I keep feeling like I've seen you somewhere before." "You?" She raised her head, and the youth with gray hair on his temples had already disappeared. Lang Bao felt lost and said in a low voice, probably an old friend. Who exactly are you?" When Qin Mu returned to his hometown, he could no longer find the old address of disabled elderly village. In its place were tall buildings, bustling with traffic and bustling with noise. "I seem to recognize you," a god transformed from a hen dragon said to him solemnly. Qin Mu smiled slightly, and the hen dragon couldn't help thinking of the tragic days in the past. When it came back to its senses, Qin Mu had already disappeared. Qin Mu returned to his wife Ling Yuxiu's side. When the battle of the ancestral court erupted, Ling Yuxiu was sent back to eternal peace. As one of the oldest emperors in eternal peace, Ling Yuxiu didn't go to eternal peace Shangjing. She seemed to know that Qin Mu would return to disabled elderly village's old residence, and she also knew that he couldn't find his old residence, so she stayed beside surging river ruins. She hadn't attained Tao yet. In the long time, even if she cultivated with all her might, she was still a step away from attaining Tao. This step was a natural moat. Even if her husband was Heavenly Venerate Mu and seventh young master, he wouldn't be able to help her walk out of this step. The couple lived by surging river calmly. Dragon-rearing sovereign would occasionally come to their house to eat and drink. Qin Mu had even entertained him a few times before, but after dragon-rearing sovereign came a few times, he chased him away. Surging river is no longer here, so the oath you swore to Earth Count has also disappeared. You won't face the calamity if you leave Surging River. Dragon-rearing sovereign, you can leave Surging River now, Qin Mu said to him. Dragon-rearing sovereign was slightly at a loss, and he asked in a trembling voice, "I can leave Surging River now?" Qin Mu said, "The day that Surging River dried up, you could leave. From that day onwards, you would no longer be Surging River's Dragon King." Dragon-rearing sovereign was overjoyed, jumping and shouting. After a long while, he suddenly burst into tears. "Where should I go? I've guarded this place for 3.5 billion years. Where should I go now? The world is so big, and the future is even bigger. You can go anywhere you want." Qin Mu patted his shoulder and watched him leave. Dragon-rearing sovereign felt lost, and he gradually walked away. The days of Qin Mu and Ling Yuxiu quieted down again. Both of them knew the worries in each other's hearts, and their souls were tied to their bloodlines. However, both of them didn't mention that matter at the same time. That was because when it was mentioned, it would be the day Qin Mu would leave, and the couple would be separated because of it. They had been together for too long. After 3.5 billion years, they would feel that they were no longer complete after separating, as if their bodies and souls had suddenly lost a piece. However, they still had to separate in the end. During these days, news kept coming from the ancestral court. There were people who had achieved Tao who were injured and had extremely serious Tao injuries. They had returned to eternal peace with great difficulty from the ancestral court, bringing news that shocked the entire universe. Jade Capital City had descended, and the prehistoric flood and fierce beasts were about to attack. The ancestral court had been shattered, and many of Eternal Peace's Tao practitioners had died in battle. The commotion caused by this news could be imagined. It swept through eternal peace and all the worlds in the universe. Isn't there someone guarding there? Some were at a loss while others were terrified. Hasn't that person been guarding there for 3.5 billion years? Why did he run away? Did he die in battle? Or did he escape? Why didn't he guard the ancestral court? Qin Mu heard many bad voices. Ling Yuxiu looked at him with some worry, but Qin Mu was very indifferent. He smiled and said, "Qinglu, or maybe the little bamboo horse of Heavenly Venerate Ling's family has become a smart one. I haven't taken it to heart for a long time. You have given too much to others, and if you suddenly don't give any more, you will attract resentment. This is human nature," Ling Yuxiu said. Human nature is like this, so there's no need to force it. Qin Mu said. What I'm worried about is those gods. They have given too much to mortals, and mortals will be demanding of them because of it. They will take it for granted. If there are gods who die from exhaustion on duty, they will be seen as doing so, and they will lack gratitude. Ling Yuxiu smiled. Husband, you have forgotten that you are no longer Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and I'm no longer the Emperor of Eternal Peace. Leave these matters to others. Qin Mu was stunned and laughed loudly. It's time to leave it to others. There were many Dao practitioners who had returned from the battlefield of the ancestral court with extremely serious injuries. Among them were people from disabled elderly village. When Qin Mu heard the news and went to see them, Granny Si saw him suddenly crying uncontrollably. She wailed loudly. We thought you were dead, so we messed up our Dao hearts and were crippled by others. Qin Mu smiled as he listened to their scolding and treated their Dao injuries. Village chief, apothecary, and the rest took turns to scold him ruthlessly. Qin Mu listened with a smile and nodded his head continuously. If you go back, go take a look at Cripple. Mute finally opened his mouth and poured out the muddy water in his water pipe. He knocked his pipe and said, Didn't you say that he had returned to the past universe? Maybe it's true. Def raised his head to look at Qin Mu, his eyes sparkling. His voice was hoarse as he said, Maybe. Yeah. Village chief's breathing was a little weak. We can't stop you from becoming the seventh young master. Since that's the case, let's go and take a look. If he's still alive, bring him back. Qin Mu nodded solemnly. He had treated the injuries of the villagers of disabled elderly village and lived with them for a period of time. The elders in the village seemed to dislike him and urged him to leave. Little bastard, let's go, let's go. No one is cooking or washing clothes for you. Go back and look for your wife. They chased him away. Qin Mu left, but he stopped on the way and stared curiously at a girl in the school hall. The girl had a strange appearance. One of her eyes was thick darkness while the other was a resplendent starry sky. When the girl realized that he was spying on her, she was shocked and immediately lowered her head, her eyes darting around. When the class was over, the girl braced herself and walked out of the class, lowering her head to his side. Don't have puppy love. The chancellor poked his head out of the class and said fiercely. I know. The young girl tilted her head and replied fiercely. Second sister, is that your father? Qin Mu asked curiously. The young girl raised her leg and kicked a rock away heavily. She said resentfully, You saw through me? Are you here to kill me? Qin Mu smiled. Second sister, I said I would give you a chance. Why would I make a move on you? You are not allowed to talk to the youth who dyed his hair. The chancellor stuck his head out and shouted. The young girl became angry from embarrassment. This is seventh young master, what do you mean by a youth who dyed his hair? Father, it's none of your business, you can go back. She turned around and raised both of her hands to grab her two braids that were hanging on her chest. She said with a smile that was not a smile, You're not going to kill me? Aren't you afraid that I'll destroy the world that you've worked so hard to protect? She was so excited that her eyes were shining. You've come to see me. You must be going back, right? After you leave, who will be my opponent? Lan Yutian? Su Shenghua? They were both younger brothers and couldn't withstand a single blow. When you return, you will see me sitting cross-legged on the sea of chaos waiting for you. Girl! The chancellor stuck his head out again and said, You've talked for a long time and you still say it's not puppy love? The young girl skipped away, her two braids flailing behind her. She turned back to make a face and said with a smile, I'll definitely win. Qin Mu smiled and waved his hand to bid her farewell. The chancellor glared at him fiercely and said in a low voice, Stay away from my daughter. Dyeing your hair white at such a young age. One look and you can tell that you are not a good person. The young girl stuck her head out from under his armpit and stuck her tongue out at Qin Mu. Qin Mu was speechless and suddenly had a sudden inspiration. He took a step and came to the beast world at the back of the origin world. After searching for a long time, he finally found a towering tree. The towering tree seemed to be able to see him and suddenly trembled. Dao brother wuxia, there's no need to panic. Qin Mu came to the tree and caressed its body. He said with a smile, If I wanted to kill you, I could have done it long ago. I came here to bid farewell to you. After all, we are old friends and our friendship is still there. The huge tree stopped trembling, and Old Man Wuya's voice came from within. Bid farewell? You plan to return to the past and become young Master Primal Chaos. Qinmu nodded with a smile. Dao brother, you didn't lose out when I gave you that Ayu back then, right? Fortunately, you really managed to keep it, or else it wouldn't be the current situation. Old Man Wuya sneered. You don't dare to kill me. Hundun, it's not that you don't want to kill me, but you actually don't dare to kill me, because you know that your path may not be clear. You didn't spare my life, but you beat me until I was about to die. Then you knelt down in front of me and begged me not to die. Qinmu was stunned. Old Man Wuya chuckled. I know your little plan. Your eternal peace has already lost its vitality, so there's no motivation to reform. Hehe, you need me to be eternal peace's enemy, eternal peace's opponent. Sure enough, it's a good idea. However, aren't you afraid that I'll destroy eternal peace? Qinmu had a kind smile on his face. Old Man Boundless laughed loudly. If you leave, I'll be invincible in the 17th epoch. As long as I recover a little, I'll be able to connect my roots to the universe eras in prehistoric times, allowing the strong practitioners who were unwilling to die here to sneak over in an endless stream. Destroying eternal peace and the myriad worlds in the heavens will be a piece of cake. What blue fields, what Su Shanghua. They're all little brothers in front of me. Qinmu blinked and smiled. I'm very gratified that Dao brother still has such great ambitions. Dao brother, don't let down what I've said today. Once we part today, I don't know when we'll meet again. I'll kill your eternal peace and let this world return to chaos. Old Man Wuya said excitedly. When you return, you'll realize that I've already become the ruler of this broken universe. At that time, I'll have already recovered to my peak, and I'll be as strong as the master of Palace Miluo. All your relatives, your women, your children. Qinmu turned his head and looked at him with a sinister gaze. Old Man Wuya's excitement immediately vanished, and he started to tremble. Qinmu turned around and left, snorting coldly. Little brother. He had finally learned a popular term of this era. The war in the ancestral court continued, forming a tug-of-war. Lan Yuqian, Su Shanghua, founding Emperor Qinyi, Jiang Baigui, Xing'an, and the others were strong, but they weren't strong enough to break through Heavenly Well. The hall masters and Dao practitioners of Mycroft Palace weren't without the ability to resist. Among them, there were already people who had successfully entrusted the ultimate void to form great overarching heaven. They had once again attained Dao in this universe, and their battle prowess had greatly increased. The dragon Qilin also returned from the ancestral court. He was also heavily injured and stuck by Qinmu's side every day. Even when his injuries had healed, he would still lick his face and ask for spirit pills. Qinmu chased him away a few times, but he couldn't chase him away at all. He could only give up. Even though the dragon Qilin was the master of the beast realm, he treasured this period of time. They had met in front of the mountain gate of Imperial College, and they had accompanied and supported each other. Qinmu was in charge of the dragon Qilin's food and called him Fatty Dragon. The dragon Qilin had gone through life and death with him, giving him encouragement that others couldn't. They were the best of friends. On this day, Qinmu finally decided to leave. He didn't wait for founding emperor, nor did he wait for Su Shanghua, Lan Yuqian, and the rest. The front line still needed their strength, and he couldn't delay for too long. Supreme Senior Brother still hasn't reincarnated, this old fox. Qinmu was quite unwilling to accept this. When Supreme Senior Brother reincarnated, he would be able to enter the filthy grounds of the ultimate void and force Tai Yi to kill the heavens. In his heart, the hidden danger of heaven-cleaving public was much greater than the members of Miluo Palace. The members of Miluo Palace still had their principles when they did things, but the actions of heaven-cleaving public were unrestrained. He always felt that getting rid of heaven-cleaving public would be a better choice. However, Supreme Master had never reincarnated, so he had obviously expected this. Only when he returned to become the seventh young master would he disperse his cultivation and start over again. Husband, don't think about those troublesome matters anymore. Ling Yuxiu tidied his clothes for him. Her expression was gentle, but her tone was unusually firm. Find Ling Yun and bring her back. Qinmu nodded solemnly and pulled her into his embrace. Don't worry. I'll definitely find her and bring her back. On this day, Most of the old friends he had left behind to guard eternal peace had come to send him off. Saint Woodcutter had also come. He was wearing a hat that covered a few strands of his hair, making him look very energetic. Qin Mu let go of Ling Yuxiu and looked at the familiar faces. Their faces were filled with smiles as if they were going to beat drums and gongs to send him off. These fake smiles made his heart feel warm. "Everyone, don't miss me," he said with a smile. Everyone urged him. "Hurry up and leave. Go and harm the old monsters of the prehistoric era. The 17th epoch can't support you anymore." They laughed very happily. Qin Mu's eyes turned red. An Hall of Chaos slowly appeared behind him. The door of the Hall of Chaos opened, revealing 16 long rivers of chaos. "Mu, Heavenly Venerate," you leaned on his crutch and limped forward. After a moment of silence he said, "Find Yuan Ling and bring them back." Qin Mu nodded solemnly. "Cult Master Qin, if you don't come back, no one in this world can control me." Xing'an lay on the chest. It was tattered, but he still walked forward with difficulty. Xing'an tried his best to raise his head, but he couldn't get up no matter how hard he tried. He was so tired that he was panting. However, he smiled proudly. "Zhang Baigui can't defeat me, and neither can Old Sword God. Su Shenghua Lan Yutian, no one can kill me. Without you to suppress me, be careful that I don't turn the 17th epoch into a mess." Qin Mu laughed loudly and said, "Don't worry, fellow Taoist Xing'an. A good person doesn't live long, but a disaster lives for 1,000 years. If you don't die, how can I bear to die?" He turned around with a gloomy expression and said to Apothecary, "Grandpa Apothecary, this fellow's injuries are so serious, why isn't he dead yet?" After saying that, his eyes revealed a fierce glint as he wiped his neck. Xing'an, who was lying on the chest, shivered. Apothecary waved his hand and whispered, don't worry, I'll poison him to death tomorrow. Leave early, don't worry, there will be an obituary tomorrow." Saint Xing'an died from his serious injuries. Xing'an shivered again. Qin Mu had a smile on his face as he said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Xing'an, treat your injuries well and don't worry about your funeral. I'm leaving everyone, there's no need to send me off." He waved his hand and walked into the hall. "Cult Master." Qin Mu stopped and turned back to look at the Dragon Qilin. The Dragon Qilin was silent for a moment before asking loudly, "When will you return?" Qin Mu revealed a smile. "The chaotic space is the place where I entered my dream. When I return, it's the time when my dream realm is shattered. The chaotic space there will bloom like fireworks." He turned around and walked into Hall of Chaos. "Who?" The first river of chaos swept up waves and swallowed his body. When this huge wave swept up, the entire Hall of Chaos was also smacked into the river. In the end, the waves disappeared, and the 16 rivers of chaos also vanished without a trace. The Dragon Qilin raised his head, and many people also raised their heads to look at the sky. Xing'an sneered, "What are you all looking at? He has returned to the depths of time and space, not flying into the sky. What's in the sky? So none of you are my match." The Dragon Qilin lowered his head and said, "I was only pretending that he flew there." Xing'an sneered endlessly. "All right." Saint Woodcutter took out his firewood axe. "Moore has left, but the war is still going on. Heavenly Court has yet to be destroyed, and Heavenly Emperor is still around. All of you, follow me to continue the war. Cold Pond. Cold Pond. You lead the left while Green Emperor leads the right. Let's kill him and turn the world upside down. Where's Cold Pond? Did he go fishing again?" The Black Tiger God quickly comforted him. He whispered to everyone, "The old master has been lonely for too long these years. He always fantasizes that those old friends are still alive. It's okay, he'll wake up soon. He just selectively forgot some things. The 10th Heavenly Venerate can't let any of them go. The reform must continue." Saint Woodcutter raised his head and looked at the sky with a serious expression. "Qin Yi, I've told you before that you cannot move to Carefree Village, or everything will be destroyed. Our foundation is here on this land." 1. Soon everyone got used to Saint Woodcutter's nonsense. Back then, he was the #1 sage in the world, but now, because he had been silent for too long, grief and time had diluted his memories, causing his thoughts to be somewhat chaotic. Apothecary treated him, he said, "It's not a big problem. It's just that it's been too long. His consciousness has been protecting him and he has forgotten some things that he can't accept. Ask the Western Emperor to come and blow the war horn. Then, ask the pig slaughtering people to blow the war drum, and he will wake up. Everyone nodded silently. The first epoch of the universe moved like time. After 800 billion years of time, the first epoch had finally reached its end. The aura of destruction filled the universe. The oldest existence was also at a loss in the face of this unknown catastrophe. Old man Wuxia stood up from under the tree and looked at the destruction of the heavens one by one. He was at a loss. The Tao practitioners in the first epoch were also at a loss. The world they protected was withering and life was dying. They also felt danger. Their great Tao began to decay. Tao trees began to wither, Tao flowers withered, and Tao fruits lost their spirituality. The Tao achievers went to the ancestral court. There was a majestic being there. He was the first Tao achiever of the first epoch, and he was also the one who created the cultivation system. He had boundless wisdom and divine abilities. There must be a way to resolve this sudden catastrophe of destruction. They called this magnificent being Milo. Milo meant vast, supreme, and boundless. The place where he lived was also known as the Milo Palace. When they arrived there, they saw from afar that the first person who had achieved Tao was collecting the most precious divine gold in the ancestral court. With his vast power and Tao skills, he was forging a huge golden boat. This is the crossing world golden ship. The master of the Miluo Palace said to the Tao masters who had come from afar, I sense that this destruction will sweep everything, destroy everything, and flatten everything. However, after everything is destroyed, the universe will automatically reopen. The crossing world golden ship can carry the life of the entire universe to the next epoch. The Tao masters of the first epoch were full of admiration. At this moment, the chaotic energy formed by the destruction of dozens of heavens were connected together. The hot wind whistled and blew, causing the chaotic energy to form a surging river that swept towards the other heavens. The master of the Miluo Palace was shocked. He raised his head to look at the long river of chaos. His gaze was deep as if he saw something. Taoist Miluo, what are you looking at? A Tao practitioner asked. I think I saw a lotus leaf in the river. There was a baby girl wrapped in the lotus leaf. The master of the Miluo Palace revealed a puzzled look and said, That lotus leaf has floated away. It's strange. How could any living being survive in that river? He immediately perked up and said with a smile, If someone can survive, it means that this calamity can definitely be overcome. Everyone, hurry up and help me. Let's build this golden boat to save all living beings. At this moment, the river of chaos shook once again as powerful figures flew out from the river of chaos. Although the master of the Miluo Palace was puzzled, it was currently at the crucial period of refining the golden ship, so he did not have the time to go and check. Suddenly, another great hall that was filled with chaotic energy spun and flew out of the river of chaos. The master of the Miluo Palace raised his head and looked at the people in front of the hall from afar. Then, he fell silent in the matter of building the ship. He did not know that his future seventh disciple had returned on this day. 5 years later, the baby girl sent by Lotus Leaf was as thin as a stick. She staggered along with the refugees. The people who helped her survive fell one after another, and were buried in this destructive disaster. She stood in the mountain of corpses and looked up. She was the only one left in the destroyed world. The sea of fire distorted, and the terrifying devil monsters that were chasing her finally found her. They wanted to seize her and destroy her. At that moment, destruction tribulation came to a stop. A tall figure separated from the sea of fire and walked toward her. I found you, my child. A familiar yet unfamiliar voice sounded out by her ears, as if it wanted to awaken the memories that were gradually fading in her mind. The daughter of chaos. Qin Mu's card had already appeared. Brothers, don't forget to draw it. If they could draw it, it would be fun. If they couldn't, it would be fine. Qin Mu raised Qin Lingyun up high and placed her on his shoulder. Qin Lingyun was pitifully thin, and there were only bones under her skin. She sat on his shoulder uneasily and her small hands grabbed his hair tightly. She turned her head to look at the side of Qin Mu's face. The white hair at her temples gave her a familiar feeling. It was the face that had been reflected in her hazy vision after she was born. This face made her feel at ease. Other than this face in her memories, There was another familiar face. It was her mother. Qin Mu looked at the figures in the flames. They were Dao practitioners who had chased after Qin Lingjun. Back then, they had intercepted their family of 3 on the River of Chaos, forcing him to have no choice but to let Qin Lingjun return to the River of Chaos of the First Epoch. They entered the universe of the First Epoch, and the father and daughter separated. This separation was 5 years for Qin Lingyun. For the past 5 years, she had no parents and became an orphan, living a lonely life. For Qin Mu and Ling Yuxiu, it was 3.5 billion years. This kind of separation made Ling Yuxiu feel resentful towards Qin Mu. During these 3.5 billion years, they didn't have a second child. Qin Mu was still fine. He had only waited for 3.5 billion years, but Ling Yuxiu still had to continue waiting. 7th Young Master. Chaos. A hoarse Dao voice came from the Sea of Fire. There was shock, fear, excitement, and ridicule in the voice. You finally came back and chose to become 7th Young Master in Chaos, they said with a smile. Qin Mu's expression was as calm as an ancient well. He clenched his fist tightly and slowly raised his right hand. Everyone, do you still remember? I once said on the River of Chaos that I would put all of you into coffins. He spread his fingers. Today, I'm here to fulfill my promise. Boom! In the flames, Dao trees suddenly exploded one after another. The furious roars of the prehistoric Dao practitioners could be heard as they fled in all directions. Their Dao fruits hung high in the sky, and Dao light pierced through the Sea of Fire. However, a huge reincarnation rose up. It enveloped all of them in the reincarnation. Their Dao trees were neatly cut in the Sea of Fire and turned into pieces of wooden planks. Strange runes were flashing and changing on the wooden planks. Those were chaos runes, Yuan. Bang bang bang. Pieces of wooden planks made of Dao trees were assembled in the chaotic Sea of Fire. The branches of the Dao trees turned into wooden nails that were nailed into the coffin planks. Dao practitioners from different eras were captured by the coffins and were dragged into their coffins while letting out shrill screams. Huge coffin planks flew up and landed on the coffins under the wooden nails. They nailed the coffin planks to death. In the chaotic Sea of Fire, the Dao soldiers of the Dao practitioners melted one after another and turned into chains that shuttled through the Sea of Fire. They pierced through the coffins and locked them up. I am Chaos. Qin Mu brought his daughter Qin Lingjun as they walked in the Sea of Fire. The coffins behind them floated with him under the guidance of the chains. When I returned to the past and came to the First Epoch, I was already invincible. Rumbling sounds came from the coffins. It was the struggles of the Dao practitioners of the various epochs, trying to break the coffins and escape. Their cultivations were extremely powerful, and the Dao practitioners who dared to stop Qin Mu and his wife on the way weren't simple characters. Their abilities were on par with the Hall Masters of Miluo Palace. However, when facing Qin Mu, who had already become Young Master in Primal Chaos, they were still far inferior. You don't have to struggle. I will create a space in this void that even destruction and life creation tribulation cannot destroy. It will be used as a place to store the trash. Qin Mu raised his hand, and a huge area in the crumbling ultimate void suddenly became stable. Coffins flew past Qin Mu and his daughter and flew over there. I'm not trying to protect you guys from destruction and life creation tribulation. In fact, this space has only reduced the power of life creation tribulation by many times and delayed it for who knows how many years. Qin Mu watched the coffins fly away, and his voice turned into Dao voice that steadily entered the ears of the Dao practitioners in the coffins. Life creation tribulation will always chase after you, wiping out your future time and time again, allowing you to slowly watch your death approach. The power of life creation tribulation will allow you to grow together with the coffins, making it impossible for you to escape. It will kill you bit by bit. And this process will last for hundreds of billions of years. You have separated us father and daughter, so that mother and daughter cannot see each other. You have separated us husband and wife. This is my punishment for you. The destruction tribulation of the First Epoch of the universe arrived as scheduled. The master of the Miluo Palace used his great magic power to transform into a voice. He gathered all the Dao practitioners and saints in the universe, brought all the living beings in the heavens to the ancestral court, and boarded the golden boat. He used the golden ship to transcend the destruction of the universe. It was an incomparably spectacular scene. On the golden ship, Golden palaces appeared one after another. The interior of the golden palaces was like the heavens, with the environment necessary for all living beings to survive. The first epoch was an incomparably glorious era. The height of development of this universe was something that even eternal peace couldn't compare to. The golden ship that the master of Miluo Palace had used all the wealth of this universe to build was naturally no small matter. When the destruction tribulation descended and the huge golden ship passed through the thick and heavy river of chaos, blocking the hot and cold wind from breaking the surface of the river and sailing on the river of chaos, the master of Miluo Palace couldn't hide the excitement in his heart. The golden ship wasn't destroyed by the destruction tribulation. His voice was hoarse as he laughed out loud. As he laughed, the Tao trees of the Tao practitioners on the golden boat turned into ashes and their Tao fruits dissipated. Only then did he notice that his fellow Taoists had already turned into white bones when the golden boat passed through the destruction tribulation. The master of the Miluo Palace was stunned. He stood at the bow of the boat and watched as the white bones of his fellow Taoists shattered and collapsed. Suddenly, he let out a loud cry and rushed toward the palaces on the golden ship. The first palace was empty. Everything in the palace had been destroyed and turned into chaotic energy. The second palace was empty. The third palace was empty. The master of the Miluo Palace rushed into the palaces one after another like he had gone mad. He rushed out of the palaces one after another. He screamed like he had gone mad. There were no syllables in his screams. There was no Tao hidden in them. There were only dry howls. He seemed to have suffered incomparably severe Tao injuries as he rushed into the golden halls again and again, even though he had already entered some of them more than once. "Father, what is he doing?" In the river of chaos, the little girl Qin Lingjun raised her head to ask her father. "He's looking for his Tao heart in his Tao heart." Qin Mu looked at this scene from afar. He lowered his head and said to Qin Lingjun, "His Tao heart has collapsed and his ideals have collapsed. He wants to find it back. Perhaps in the future, I'll be like him and find my own ideals and my own Tao heart." The master of Mycroft Palace searched over and over again, but he was the only one left on the entire golden ship. In the end, he sat down dejectedly and looked at the long river of chaos in a daze. The golden boat was drifting along the long river of chaos. The calamity of destruction was imminent, but it was unable to shake the boat or him in the slightest. The master of the Miluo Palace's Tao heart was desolate, as if he was about to enter the path of destruction. At this moment, a man with white sideburns held the hand of a little girl and arrived on the golden boat. The master of the Miluo Palace looked at him with lifeless eyes. Suddenly, his eyes moved and the man with white sideburns greeted him as a disciple. "Future guests." Miluo Palace master returned the greeting and said, "I saw something that doesn't belong to this universe from all of you. You guys seem to have walked very far in time. Are you guys from the future?" "Teacher, I'm your seventh disciple, Chaos." Qin Mu said, "I came back here to see you." Miluo Palace master looked at them in a daze and suddenly asked, "Is the future okay?" "The future is fine," Qin Mu said with a smile. The master of Miluo Palace fell silent, and his deathly silent Tao heart seemed to slowly recover. His thoughts returned, and he staggered into the golden halls, mourning for his friends, the lives, and the years of the past. After a long time, he walked out of the golden halls, and his seventh disciple and the little girl were already nowhere to be seen. The master of the Miluo Palace was at a loss. After the destruction tribulation, it was the creation tribulation. When the creation tribulation erupted, the 5 great Taos evolved. When the great Tao of Taiji evolved into the myriad Taos of heaven and earth, a new universe was born. Old man Wuya sat in the jade pool under the world tree. Bored, he took out the primordial chaos liquid and rubbed the mud on his body. The destruction tribulation and the creation tribulation were indeed grand and spectacular, but they always made him covered in dust. Taoist brother Wuya. When old man Wuya heard this voice, he looked out from the jade lake and saw a man with white sideburns walking over with a little girl. He quickly jumped out of the jade lake and quickly put on his clothes. He chuckled and said, "I know you. You are not from this universe. I saw you jump out of the chaos. I am the 7th disciple of the master of the Miluo Palace, Chaos. In the future I will benefit from you. So I came here to thank you for your help." The young man smiled. Dao brother helped me in the future, but I have nothing to repay you for that. I owe you a favor, so I can only return to the past and write an IOU for you. Old man Wuya smiled. So you're Miluo's disciple. What kind of status do I have? In terms of seniority, Miluo has to call me senior, so why do I need your IOU? I'm not your son. Forget it, there's no need for an IOU. Qin Mu's expression was kind. Dao brother, it's better to accept it. It might be useful in the future, right? He finished writing the IOU and old man Wuya casually accepted it. When Qin Mu saw this, he kindly reminded him, Dao brother, this IOU won't be able to pass the destruction and creation tribulations. It's best to put it in the root of the tree. Old man Wuya did as he was told and smiled. You are quite interesting. He looked at the little girl beside Qin Mu and found the ice and snow cute. I saw a little girl beside you in the destruction tribulation of the first epoch. Is that her? Why hasn't she grown up yet? Qin Mu smiled. She was born in the future and relied on the destruction tribulation to survive. She has already absorbed the power of the next few destruction tribulations. Only the power of the destruction tribulation of the first epoch began to be absorbed after she was born, so she can only grow in the first epoch. There's such a strange thing? Old man Wuya was astonished. When he saw that Qin Mu's conversation was extraordinary, his interest was piqued. The longer they talked, the more he felt that this person was extraordinary. Qin Mu looked around. There were no signs of human habitation in the vast ancestral hall. Only the 5 supreme gods were gathering and brewing, and the 5 supreme gods were waiting to be born. Don't look, there's no share for you. Old man Wuya smiled. Miluo has been guarding there for a long time. The life forms in the first mine had been taken away by him when they were born. Oh right, you are also his disciple from the future, so you must know what I'm like in the future, right? Qin Mu said solemnly, Patriarch Wuya's magic power is boundless, and it can penetrate through the universe for eons. Countless Dao practitioners have submitted to protect Patriarch. Old man Boundless laughed loudly. Your words are so nice. As expected of Miluo family's 7th brother. I like you a lot. In the second epoch, the master of Miluo Palace had entered the world to help others and imparted divine arts, paths, and skills. The number of lives in the world gradually increased, and there were many ancient gods and lives of various races who followed him to learn and ask questions. The first disciple of the master of Miluo Palace was still a young brat, and he had already received the true teachings of the master of Miluo Palace. Sometimes he would pass down the teachings for his teacher. On this day, he met a strange father and daughter. They sized them up curiously, but he couldn't tell their origins. Grand Supreme's heart trembled and he got up to ask, where did the 2 Dao brothers come from? Qin Mu immediately said, Senior brother Grand Supreme, I'm your 7th junior brother Hundun. I entered the sect later than you, so I can't be called Dao brother. Grand Supreme was at a loss. Qin Mu asked, where did senior brother come from? Grand Supreme said, I was born in Great Change Mine and was originally an egg. Teacher enlightened me and let me cultivate with him. Qin Mu came to a realization and laughed loudly. No wonder Great Change couldn't win against Young Master and Grand Supreme and always suffered at the hands of Grand Supreme. So that's how it is. He finally figured out the crux of the problem. Great Change was the primordial spirit of the Master of Celestial Capital, and had possessed the great change of the 17th epoch. Because it was possession, his comprehension and application of the path of great change were always a little lacking, and he was restrained by Grand Supreme time and time again. In the end, he was captured and placed in the coffin of the god of burial path. Senior brother, did teacher bring you to the returning ruins to take a look? Qin Mu asked with a smile. Supreme One felt that his smile was malicious, but since he was his junior brother, he probably wouldn't harm him. He shook his head and said, no. Why don't you go take a look? Qin Mu said patiently after that. Grand Supreme really went to the returning ruins to take a look. He had accidentally fallen into the great abyss of the second epoch and almost died there. When the master of Miluo Palace heard the news, he rushed over and saved him. He saw the honest Grand Supreme with his left hand and right hand holding a pair of girls who looked exactly the same. They were the clever goddesses of the returning ruins. Who let you go down? Miluo Palace Master reprimanded. How dangerous is this place? With your current abilities, you won't be able to keep your life if you go down. Grand Supreme put down the sinkhole goddesses and lowered his head to admit his mistake. Seventh junior brother asked me to take a look. Seventh junior brother and his father were still here just now. He looked around and couldn't find any trace of Qin Mu and his daughter. Could I have been deceived? Grand Supreme scratched his head. The expression of the Miluo Palace Master sank and he said earnestly, even though your seventh junior brother is real, I can see that he has some evil nature and doesn't seem to be a good person. You might meet him again in the future, so you must stay far away from him. Grand Supreme escaped death and nodded repeatedly in agreement. The Miluo Palace Master looked at the pair of sinkhole goddess and immediately saw that they were extraordinary, he said. The two of you are actually one person. One mind and two bodies, one Tao and two uses. You must not treat yourselves as two people. If you treat yourselves as two people, there will definitely be trouble. From now on, you can cultivate with me. The two goddesses were blessed to their souls and kowtowed. Please bestow your names, Master. One life and one death. There is no limit to the Tao. You shall be called Wuji. Palace Master Miluo said. You have to be careful of your seventh junior brother. Chaos, don't be tricked by him. The two women looked at each other and smiled. Teacher, we are smart and intelligent. Who can trick us? Palace Master Miluo shook his head and felt a little uneasy. At the same time, he felt a little strange in his heart. Why would I take in such a disciple in the future? He does things a little wantonly, so I have to give him some advice. He went to look for Qin Mu, who was sleeping soundly in the starry sky of the second epoch. Dream realms spread out from the chaos, and it turned into miniature universes. The daughter of chaos was shuttling back and forth in them, playing happily. Miluo Palace Master stood in front of the dream realm, and a Tao creator Qin Mu suddenly popped his head out from one of the universes. Miluo Palace Master smiled and nodded to greet him, only to see the Tao creator Qin Mu speaking in a language that no one could understand. He shouted at him with an anxious expression. Miluo Palace Master couldn't understand what he was saying, but he suddenly saw the miniature universe being destroyed. Destruction tribulation erupted, and all of Qin Mu and the entire universe turned into ashes, leaving only chaos. That Tao creator Qin Mu also turned into ashes, but the fragments of great overarching heaven and the withered Tao tree were left behind. Life creation tribulation erupted, and the fragments of great overarching heaven and the withered Tao tree were also destroyed, no longer existing. The master of Miluo Palace fell into deep thought and returned. From then on, Miluo Palace had a rule that didn't allow anyone to disturb seventh young master's chaotic sleep. He had prepared for a rainy day, and while he was still growing in the second epoch, he had started to prepare to face the destruction tribulation. The second epoch was long, and it had given birth to many intelligent and powerful existences. It had also given birth to many touching stories, and their splendor wasn't inferior to that of the 17th epoch. The master of the Miro Palace had done his duty of imparting knowledge and teachings. He began to build the first jade capital city. The golden boat was used to ferry the world. The boat was used to ferry the world, and the jade capital city was used to defend the world. He was focused on perfecting the jade capital city and did not care about the outside world. The Supreme Master had already attained the Tao and could do many things for him. However, there was a Supreme Master who came to complain about what the seventh young master and his daughter had done. How could the father and daughter go around swindling and deceiving people? The master of the Miro Palace asked for the whole story, but it was all trivial matters. There was nothing wrong with the big picture. He said, "Ignore him. He is your junior brother. Don't look at him with prejudice. He entered the sect earlier than me. Why do you call him junior brother?" The Supreme said in a muffled voice. "His ability is higher than mine. He should be the senior brother. He came back from the future. He is mature and steady in doing things. On the other hand, you are more impulsive." The master of the palace said, "From what I saw, although what he did seemed like a scam, he did not make any mistakes. On the other hand, you often seem like you have good intentions, but you actually do bad things. You should learn more from junior brother." After that, the Supreme Master was indeed much more steady. He thought twice before doing anything. The second epoch was still destroyed. The master of the palace wanted to save everyone, but he failed again. Only the Supreme Master and a few other Dao practitioners were saved in Jade Capital. Wuji escaped the apocalypse because he was hiding in the ultimate. The master of the Miluo Palace left the dilapidated Jade Capital city alone. As he watched the apocalypse destroy the second epoch wantonly, he felt a deep sense of powerlessness. At this moment he saw his seventh disciple, Hun Dun, and his daughter swimming freely in the second epoch's apocalypse. That little girl was absorbing the power of the apocalypse. In the second epoch's apocalypse, there were many things that did not exist in the first epoch. There was a place where trash was thrown and there was a chaotic space. Father and daughter are busy in the apocalypse, do not know what to make. Even though the magnanimity of the master of Miluo Palace were astonishing, he couldn't help being a little angry at this moment and found Qin Mu and his daughter. You go back to the past, in the end, what is the purpose? Why to watch the apocalypse happen? Why not save the world? Qin Mu and his daughter stopped in their tracks. Qin Mu greeted them. Teacher, I'm only here as a witness to find some people and things. I won't interfere in the past. Furthermore, I can't save them. Just a witness? The master of Miluo Palace shed tears as he recalled the lives of the masses in the second epoch. Each and every one of them had died in the destruction tribulation, and sorrow came from his heart. After a long while he asked, How's the future? The future is very good. Qin Mu took a wisp of qi of chaos and made it into a futon to give to him. Teacher, there are still lives in the third epoch, so I still need teacher to enter the world to transcend them. Before the life creation tribulation in the third epoch erupted, the master of Miluo Palace had finally regained his Tao heart and his philosophy. He turned back to look at the endless scenes of history in the second epoch, and looked forward to see the future that would happen in the third epoch. He couldn't see everything in the third epoch because the future was the evolution of physical particles. The disturbance of any particle would create countless scenes, and even with his powerful wisdom, he couldn't see through the future with a single glance. He was not powerful enough yet, but he wanted to see the future, see through the future, and see if he had succeeded. At this time, the father and daughter of chaos had also entered the eve of the life creation tribulation. The image of the future was chaotic and boundless. The master of the Mycroft Palace only had time to glare at the father and daughter. The life creation tribulation had already erupted. He could only do his best to protect the Supreme, so that the Supreme would not die in the calamity. At that moment, Grand Supreme didn't have the ability to resist life creation tribulation. As for Wuji, he didn't need to worry. The fifth Supreme evolved and the third era arrived. Old Man Wuya and Qin Mu were chatting casually. Old Man Wuya sighed ruefully. 2 eras have passed, and only you father and daughter can be considered my old friends. Miluo is too busy and Grand Supreme is a mute. The girl Wuji is detestable, but only you father and daughter are pleasing to the eye. They watched as the master of the Milo Palace led Grand Supreme and Wuji through the new world. The new universe was desolate, but life was faintly being nurtured. The power of Taiji allowed this new universe to have many more lives. Taiji was the mother of all things. The master of the Milo Palace saw this generation of ancient god Taiji. Ancient god Taiji had become a Tao the moment he was born. He was a young man and called himself the capital of heaven. Tiandu had cultivated with him for a long time, but his ideals weren't compatible with Miluo, so he walked out of Miluo Palace and established his own sect. Qin Mu brought his daughter Qin Lingjun over. Tiandu had established the divine city of Tiandu, and when he saw the ruins of Jade Capital City, he heard the master of Miluo Palace talk about destruction and creation tribulations, so he had his own thoughts. He planned to build a divine city that could also pass through the 2 great tribulations. Qin Mu and his daughter had 2 seats in Heaven Capital City, so they were very familiar with many Tao practitioners in Heaven Capital City. They had a good relationship. Grand Supreme was rather indignant, so he complained to Miluo, "You have to be steady. Your junior brother has his own reasons for doing things, so there's no need to be calculative." Even though Miluo Palace and Heaven Capital City have different ideals, they are both for the future, so there's no difference, Miluo said. Grand Supreme became a little more steady. The third epoch soon came to a bad stage. The Tao practitioners in Heaven Capital City, worked hard for the coming destruction and creation tribulations. They quarreled and thought of many ways. Only Qin Mu and his daughter occupied the seats, but they never came up with any ideas. In the end, Qin Mu and his daughter were chased out of Heaven Capital City. Heaven Capital City felt rather regretful. Dao friend Hundun, they don't know your abilities, but I know that your abilities are even higher than mine and teachers. They think you are a bastard, but I feel that every word and action of yours has a deep meaning. However, I can't keep you here, so I can only send you off. The gates of Heaven Capital City are always open for you, and we await your arrival. Qin Mu said vaguely. Don't worry, Dao brother, I'll be back. The third epoch was destroyed, and Heaven Capital City was completely destroyed. Jade Capital City also suffered heavy losses, and there were only a few Dao practitioners left. Only a few broken Dao trees and Dao fruits were left. Heaven Capital City was crying loudly in the chaos, and the master of Miluo Palace brought Grand Supreme to comfort him. It was as if they were in the same boat. At that moment, they saw Qin Mu and his daughter bustling about in Destruction Calamity, while that girl called Qin Lingyun was still busy absorbing the power of Destruction Calamity. Tiandu was furious and was about to go up to reason with him, but Miluo stopped him. He's from the future, so there are some things that can't be said. What's the use of coming back if you know but don't say anything? Tiandu was still unable to calm his anger. Milo pouted his lips, and Tiandu saw the abandoned land and chaotic space in the destruction tribulation. The father and daughter were moving some of the things born in chaos to those two places. You can't beat him, Milo said. I can't even see through his abilities. Tiandu fell silent. Chaos, what's the future like? The master of Milo Palace asked Qin Mu again. The future is very good. Tiandu sneered. However, in the fourth epoch, Qin Mu ran over again. Tiandu didn't blame him, so he didn't have the time to bother with him. Tiandu had big things to do, so he wanted to take in the fifth supreme innate expert of the fourth epoch before the master of Miluo Palace. He wanted to prove that his ideals were better than teachers' ideals, and his magnanimity was also better than teachers. As the Heaven Capital grew stronger, he had many followers. The divine arts and mantras of the Heaven Capital also gradually formed their own system. The difference between the divine arts and mantras of the Miluo Palace was getting bigger and bigger. The Supreme was a little unhappy because the Heaven Capital told the public that the Miluo Palace was not orthodox. The Heaven Capital was the orthodox. He went to reason with them, but was beaten up by the people of the Heaven Capital. When he came back to complain to the master of the Miluo Palace, the master of the Miluo Palace said, "Both of us are fighting to cross the world. What difference does it make who is the orthodox?" After a few years, Grand Supreme said to Miluo, "Old Seven is causing trouble again. The people have great grievances, so many people have come to complain, saying that he has done many evil deeds." The master of Miluo Palace looked at Qin Mu's actions and smiled. These are all harmless little things. Grand Supreme, relax your heart. After a few more years, Old Man Wuya came to see the master of Miluo Palace and said that Heaven Capital had done evil and was a blasphemer. Fellow Taoist, they are going to ruin your orthodoxy. The master of Miluo Palace smiled. All the paths and skills in the world came from Miluo, so this sentence might be a little biased. Dao brother, perhaps they are the true orthodoxy. Old Man Wuya could only give up. The fourth epoch's destruction was coming, and everyone in Heaven Capital City said to Heaven Capital, that father and daughter ran away. Don't bother with them, we'll face the calamity head on. Father, what are we doing here? Qin Lingjun was puzzled. When she saw Qin Mu bringing her to the place where the calamity had erupted, she immediately asked, "Waiting for a person?" Qin Mu stared at the place where the calamity had erupted. He saw the chaotic qi stirring and forming a long river. Soon the calamity would spread to the entire universe and engulf all the heavens. Suddenly, a person fell into the river from the river of chaos. It was a giant with a huge corporeal body and a huge axe in his hand. Just as he was about to fall into the fourth epoch from destruction calamity, he mustered his magic power and jumped out of the calamity with all his might. At that moment, Qin Mu stretched out his hand and grabbed. His palm fell into the calamity and turned into countless white bones that grabbed the giant tightly and pulled him into the calamity. The The giant's head was still on the surface of the river of chaos. He raised his head and smiled at Wei Suifeng and Xu Jun on the long ship. "Follow the map and save me." When he said that, he was pulled into the river by Qin Mu. The giant fell into the fourth epic's destruction calamity and swung his axe. Qin Mu raised his hand to block it and smiled. "Tai, it's me." The giant Tai was stunned and cried out, "It was you who pulled me into the calamity?" Qin Mu stretched out a finger and carefully pushed away Great Yi's divine axe on his neck. He smiled and said, "Dao brother Miluo Palace Master also has good intentions. Calm down." The divine axe was pushed away by him, and it was placed on his neck again. The calamity completely erupted, and the fourth epoch was destroyed. Qin Mu immediately said, "Your body of heaven capital is here, so I'll give you a chaos rune that can help your primordial spirit reincarnate to the fifth epoch. It won't disappear because of this. You can take this opportunity to see what Heaven Capital City has done." Heaven Capital City was about to be embroiled in the calamity of destruction, so he didn't say anything and imprinted the chaos rune on Giant Tai Yi's body. When Heaven Capital City was embroiled in the calamity of destruction, Giant Tai Yi was astonished. He thought he would disappear, but when he saw that he was still there, he let out a sigh of relief. Chaos! He put away Great Yi's divine axe and looked at Qin Mu with doubt. "Young Master Chaos?" Qin Mu nodded with a smile. Great Change sighed and said, "If you drag me to the fourth epoch, you will put great pressure on you in the 17th epoch. Eternal peace might even be destroyed because of it. Fellow Taoist, I've already completely endured the battle in the 17th epoch." Qin Mu held Qin Lingjuan's hand. "Some things happened after you left," he said indifferently. "The reason I came back this time was to fulfill those things and completely resolve the void in the future. I still need to look for a person, a thin and strange person with one eye. You should know this person. A lanky freak with one eye? The lanky freak has one eye, not three. There's a mistake in the previous paragraph and has been changed. It was too easy to think about it. The lanky freak you mentioned is a lanky freak that's attached to the roots of the world tree, waiting to enter the 17th epoch? There's an eye in the heart of his brows, a very big eye. He's on the 12th ring of the world tree." Qin Mu nodded. "I don't recognize him. He's the sacred one of the 12th epoch, and now it's the 4th epoch. It's still early to the 12th epoch." Tai Yi said, "I'll help you find him in the 12th epoch. What happened after I left the Great Black Mountain?" Qin Mu said indifferently, "Just some small matters." Tai Yi looked at the white hair on his temples and suddenly asked, "How many years did you go through before you came back here? You must have suffered a lot, right?" Qin Mu gently stroked Qin Lingyun's little head. His gaze was gentle and very indifferent. "Not long, just 3.5 billion years. My daughter and I have already gone back to the past and gone through more than 200 billion years. That's why when I saw you, I knew you were 7th Young Master Primal Chaos and not Heavenly Venerate Mu. Heavenly Venerate Mu wasn't as experienced as you." Tai Yi looked at Heavenly Capital Divine City in the Destruction Tribulation. There, he was fighting against the Destruction Tribulation with many fellow Taoists in his previous life. He already knew the outcome of this battle and knew that many fellow Taoists had died in the Destruction Tribulation, but none of them had died in it. Most of the time they would be buried in the Creation Tribulation. It was this result that made him determined to create a perfect world. And this would become reality in the 7th epoch. Heaven opening. It was a magnificent feat that made people's hearts surge. Other than Qin Mu, who had opened the heavens, who hadn't participated in it and was only making a familiar face outside the arena, everyone else had participated in the opening of the heavens. After that, he would die at the hands of the master of Miluo Palace and be saved by Ling. He would be sent to the future 16th epoch in the form of his primordial spirit. "Young Master Chaos, you said that this is the compensation from the master of Miluo Palace? He wants me to start all over again from the 4th epoch." Tai Yi was somewhat at a loss. He looked at Miluo Palace, which was in the midst of destruction, and shook his head. "He won't be so kind." He didn't wait for Qin Mu's reply and turned his head to look. Qin Mu and the little girl had already disappeared without a trace. The 5th epoch had arrived. Tai Yi saw Heaven Capital to look for the 5th Supreme of this epoch, But what was strange was that the future visitors had actually chased to this epoch and started to chase after Tai Yi. That was the Miluo Palace's powerhouse from the 16th era in the future. He had crossed many rivers of chaos to the 5th era and returned to the respective bodies of this era, frantically searching for his whereabouts. Among them, with the young master Tai Shang as the leader, he led the Miluo Palace's palace master-level existences to chase after him everywhere. He had no choice but to hide everywhere and change his identity at any time and place. During the 5th epoch, the Miluo Palace and Tiandu City formed two holy lands, each with a large scale. The Miluo Palace could already see the embryonic form of the later generations. The Supreme Master had already cultivated the Supreme Hall and was honored as a young master by many Dao practitioners. He was the #1 young master of the Miluo Palace. As for Wuji, although she joined the Miluo Palace at the same time as the Supreme Master, she did not become a young master. On the contrary, she didn't reveal herself in Miluo Palace. She had never been able to attain Dao, and her abilities couldn't compare to those of other practitioners. Apart from these two great sacred grounds, there was also the third sacred ground, which was Old Man Wuya. Old Man Wuya of the 5th epoch already had an extremely huge number of followers. Strong practitioners kept coming under his tutelage, begging for protection. The scale of the forces under Old Man Wuya even surpassed that of Miluo Palace and Heavenly Capital City. Tai Yi traveled the world and would occasionally meet Qin Mu. However, at this moment, Qin Mu's reputation wasn't very good whether he was in Miluo Palace or Heaven Capital City. There were often people who called him a swindler. There were often fights between the three sacred grounds. Even though they fought until the sky collapsed, the masters of both Miluo Palace and Heaven Capital City restrained themselves and restrained the Dao practitioners in their respective sacred grounds. On the other hand, Old Man Wuya was very uneasy about Tiandu City and chased after them fiercely. Great Change tried his best to avoid participating in the fights between the three forces. However, young Master Grand Supreme seemed to have his eyes on him and would descend from the 16th epoch to his corporeal body from time to time, chasing after him relentlessly. The 6th epoch arrived as scheduled. Great Change changed his appearance and avoided the pursuit of Grand Supreme, who had chased him to the 6th epoch. At that moment he met Qin Mu again. The little girl beside Qin Mu didn't seem to have grown up. She was still as ice and snow cute as when they had first met and had always followed Qin Mu. Third young master Ling Xiao of Moreau Palace has already entered Moreau Palace. Great Change's gaze flickered and he said to him, "A few days ago, Grand Supreme had collaborated with Ling Xiao to hunt me down. Chaos, don't you have any thoughts?" Third young master Ling Xiao is the culprit who presided over the blood sacrifice of the 17th epoch. Qin Mu was astonished and said, "Third brother is from the 6th epoch? I have to go take a look." Great Change watched them leave and let out a sigh of relief. It was really hard for him to be hunted down by Miluo Palace. If Qin Mu could plot against Ling Xiao, the pressure on him would be less. After a few days, Great Change saw Qin Mu drinking and chatting happily with young master Ling Xiao. They were like brothers from different mothers. Tai Yi was furious and was about to ask when he saw young master, Grand Supreme, together with a group of experts from Miluo Palace, chasing after them. Qin Mu was waving his flag to cheer them on. Tai Yi could only change his face and escape again. Later on, the Dao practitioners of Miluo Palace warned little junior brother Ling Xiao about Qin Mu's various actions. Only then did Ling Xiao gradually distance himself from Qin Mu. In the 6th epoch, a huge event happened. Wuji became Dao and became the second young master of Miluo Palace, cultivating Wuji Hall. Qin Mu went over to congratulate him and whispered, "How many sinkhole goddesses did second sister eat?" "Old 7, what nonsense are you talking about? I don't understand." Young Master Wuji's eyes sparkled. A few days later, Great Easy met Qin Mu, who was being pursued by young Master Wuji. The two of them escaped together. "With your abilities you aren't afraid of Wuji, so why didn't you fight back?" Great Easy asked in confusion. Qin Mu smiled but didn't answer. Qin Lingyun said crisply, "My father said that he wouldn't fight back even if someone died in his hands." Great Yi's heart trembled violently, and he let out a turbid breath. It was finally the end of the 6th epoch, and destruction tribulation had erupted. Great Yi was still being hunted down, so he changed his appearance and hid in Heaven Capital City. However, he met Qin Mu again. Qin Mu and Qin Lingyun had actually come to Heaven Capital Divine City in this life. They were said to be the most ancient doyens of Heaven Capital City, and they would definitely help Heaven Capital City accomplish a great undertaking that was unparalleled in the world. The people of Celestial Capital City were deeply suspicious and started to clamor. Some said that he was a spy sent by Miluo Palace, while others said that he was very close to Old Man Wuya, and that he was a spy of Old Man Wuya. Young Master Hundun is more like the spy that our Celestial Capital City has planted beside Miluo Palace and Wuya. Someone said with astonishing words. At that moment, the Master of Celestial Capital City picked up a girl from Destruction Tribulation and said happily, "Let me introduce everyone, this is Ling. He's a fellow Taoist who shares the same ideals as us." Everyone in Heavenly Capital City stood up one after another. Heavenly Venerate Ling's gaze was like a blazing sun reflecting snow as it swept past everyone and landed on Qin Mu's face. Qin Mu's face was filled with smiles. Heavenly Capital City opened up the heavens and opened up the seventh epoch of the universe. Qin Mu didn't participate in it but watched from the side. The figures of Heavenly Capital City's master and 36 heavens opening masses were imprinted in time and space eternally, becoming an indestructible painting scroll. However, the picture scroll didn't have their father and daughter, and it wasn't too easy either. In the seventh epoch, Heaven Capital City had completely suppressed Miluo Palace and Wuya. Heaven-cleaving masses had suppressed Miluo Palace and Wuya in all sorts of ways, and Heaven Capital City had gradually deteriorated. The Master of Heaven Capital City hadn't noticed it, or it could be said that even if he had, he wouldn't have taken it to heart. He and Heavenly Venerate Ling were the same type of person. Apart from the path, there was nothing else. The seventh epoch was originally the testing ground for him and the capital city. The living beings of the seventh epoch were all accessories to the testing ground. He thought so, and so did the Splitting Heavens sect. Tai walked the world. Looking at his previous life and the actions of the Splitting Heavens sect, he sighed in his heart. "Teacher, you were right. I was wrong." In this life, even he was unable to attain the Tao again. In the past, he could attain Tao in every universe epoch and cultivate another Tao fruit. However, in the seventh epoch, he was unable to cultivate a Tao fruit. This was because the great Tao of heaven and earth had already been controlled by heaven-cleaving masses. Whoever heaven-cleaving masses wanted to let attain Tao could attain Tao. Whoever wanted to erase their Tao could erase their Tao. The decline and destruction of the seventh epoch was earlier than expected. The Master of Miluo Palace had visited Heaven Capital City 3 times, and killed the Master of Heaven Capital City on his 4th visit. At that time, Qin Mu had been standing by Ling Zhao's side. Ling Zhao's eyes were sparkling as he watched the divine art that the Master of Miluo Palace had executed when he had killed the Master of Heaven Capital City. Qin Mu looked at Heavenly Venerate Ling. Heavenly Venerate Ling's quality couldn't be perfected easily, so he had silently saved the primordial spirit of Heaven Capital City, which was separated from Tai. The war between Heaven Capital City and Miluo Palace broke out from the end of the 7th epoch all the way to the 10th epoch. The soaring heavens had displayed exceptional battle prowess, causing heavy casualties to the Miluo Palace. They were known as the Shadow of the Miluo Palace. However, Ling was a loner and was very close to the 7th chaos of the Miluo Palace. He was abandoned by the soaring heavens. From the 7th epoch to the 10th epoch, it could be said that it was a war that swept through the universe. It was extremely bitter. Ling Xiao had attained the Tao and cultivated the soaring heavens palace. However, he was surrounded and attacked by the soaring heavens and was repeatedly injured. That was the most massive war. In the 17 universe epochs, it was hard to find a war that could be compared to it. In the 10th epoch, the vitality of the Miluo Palace was greatly damaged. Grand Supreme Wuji and Ling Xiao were all heavily injured by Ling Tianzun. The master of the Miluo Palace had no choice but to make a move and suppress Ling Tianzun, who split Heaven's faction. Only then was the splitting Heaven's faction of the heavenly capital city suppressed. They gradually disappeared. Tai went to see Zixao. At that moment, Zixao was still a swordsman who was obsessed with swords. His wife was an outstanding person. Tai met Qin Mu and his daughter, who were guests at Zixao's home. The 3 of them understood each other and witnessed the birth of Zixao's Tao proving tuned together. The true Tao-proving tune of Zi Xiao made the three of them clap their hands on the table and reminisce for a long time. As a reckless person, Zi Xiao is so envious of his wife. He hasn't joined Moreau Palace yet, so don't you plan to leave anything behind? Tai Yi's gaze flickered as he asked Qin Mu. Qin Mu shook his head. I came here to listen to this famous song. My battle with Zi Xiao was within my grasp, but in the end I was defeated by this song. Zi Xiao's wife is a strange woman, so I can't not see her. Tai Yi wanted to make a move on Zi Xiao, but Qin Mu stopped him. Zi Xiao was also defeated by this song. Tai Yi couldn't understand. Later on, the destruction tribulation of the 10th epoch erupted. At the peak of the destruction tribulation, Zi Xiao's Tao-proving song rang out once more. Tai Yi heard it and came over, meeting Qin Mu again. Qin Mu held Qin Lingyun's hand as he stood in the tribulation. He watched the couple embrace each other in the fire of destruction, and in that instant it was eternal. The Zi Xiao at that moment was the Zi Xiao of the 17th epoch. He had chosen to stay forever at that moment with his wife. The Zi Xiao of the 11th epoch had entered Miluo Palace, and the path and skills of Miluo Palace had made him the 4th young master. When the 12th epoch arrived, it was too easy to find Qin Mu. I found that thin and long freak. He's under Old Man Boundless. Qin Mu came to Old Man Boundless territory. Old Man Boundless became stronger and stronger. His magic power was boundless, and countless strong practitioners surrounded him. He was like the #1 sacred ground in the universe. The war between Miluo Palace and Heaven Capital City lasted for 4 universe eons, and his vital chi was greatly damaged. No one knew where he had split open the sky. Old Man Boundless was the only one in the world, and he even had the world tree to connect to the future, allowing the strong practitioners who had yet to reach the Tao to live to the next aeon. Thus he had many supporters. Ever since Heaven Capital City was defeated and Heavenly Venerate Ling was suppressed by the Master of Mycroft Palace, the people who had split the heavens had vanished without a trace. Qin Mu was the only blasphemer left. The Tao Realm Tao Tree system made Old Man Boundless cultivation stronger and stronger. There were even rumors that his strength had long surpassed that of the Master of Mycroft Palace, and he was the #1 person without a doubt. Even the 4th young master Zi Xiao had a close relationship with him. He had used his strength to complete the grand undertaking of unifying the universe and becoming the universe emperor of the 12th epoch. Zi Xiao had many things to do. He even planned to borrow boundless power in an attempt to return to the past to save his dead wife. However, all of this was in vain. Old Man Boundless was also happy to have Zi Xiao as his puppet, supporting him to rule the universe. At this time, the 3rd young master Ling Xiao had created the blood sacrifice technique of mass and energy exchange. Through the blood sacrifice, the mass and energy exchange would proceed to the next universe epoch. With that, in every destruction and creation tribulation, Miluo Palace would no longer have to worry about losing Tao practitioners. It was just that he had yet to spread this technique. Qin Mu came to see Old Man wuxia, but because he was a blasphemer, he didn't like him very much. In the past, their relationship was very good. The friendship between Old Man wuxia and Qin Mu could even be traced back to the beginning of the 2nd epoch. However, Qin Mu and Tiandu were very close, which caused cracks to appear in their relationship. Later on, Old Man wuxia paid little attention to Qin Mu and even treated him as an enemy. When Qin Mu held Qin Lingjuan's hand and walked to the world tree, chaos suddenly shrouded the entire world tree. The thick and heavy aura of chaos made it hard for people to breathe. Everyone thought that 7th young master Chaos and Old Man wuxia would definitely have a battle, and even Miluo Palace was alarmed. The master of Miluo Palace came out of seclusion and watched from afar. However, no one knew what had happened inside the chaos. When the chi of chaos dispersed, the relationship between Old Man wuxia and Qin Mu seemed to have returned to the past. The two of them chatted cheerfully as if nothing had happened. Grand Supreme and the rest also didn't see what had happened in the chaos, so they went to ask the master of Miluo Palace. I don't understand the divine art of Hundun either, but Old Man wuxia should have forgotten something, Miluo Palace Master said. Supreme and the others asked, but Miluo Palace Master didn't explain in detail. He only said, Chaos is your junior brother. He's getting closer and closer to attaining the Tao. Don't provoke him. In the next few days, I'm going to jump out of the river of chaos and explore the future. Don't always provoke Old 7. Old 7 hasn't attained the Tao yet? Everyone's eyes were sparkling. The master of the Miluo Palace finally jumped out of the river of primordial chaos and onto the surface of the river. His divine abilities had already surpassed all eras. It wasn't until the end of the 16th epoch that the Miluo Palace's divine abilities reached this stage. Furthermore, at that time, the Miluo Palace's divine abilities only went back to the past, not forward to the future. The master of the Miluo Palace had already surpassed him by too much. As he stood on the river, he saw all sorts of things in the past and all sorts of things in the future. In front of him was the river of chaos of the 12th epoch. Behind him was the passage of 11 eras. From time to time, figures would pass through the river. They were people who had returned to the past. It was as if they couldn't see the master of the Miluo Palace. They even passed through his body. Within a short period of time, the master of the Miluo Palace had seen through everything that had happened in the past 11 eras. He had seen through everything in the world, but he knew nothing about the future. He turned around and walked forward. He walked past the future that had been destroyed in the 12th epoch and walked towards the 13th epoch. The 13th epoch had also been destroyed. He walked towards the 14th epoch, the 15th epoch, and the 16th epoch. Although he was unable to see through the river of chaos and see what had happened in the future universe eras, the destruction of these universe eras showed that he had failed. As the 16th epoch moved forward, there was no longer any river of chaos. He looked at the surface of the river, unable to see anything in the future 17th epoch. There was no Miluo Palace, no world tree, no sinkhole great abyss. The darkness was boundless, and there was nothing there. 1. The master of the Miluo Palace wept. He wept alone on the river like a helpless child. All of his persistence and ideals collapsed. At this moment, chaos energy surged out from the darkness of the 17th epoch. A palace appeared in the chaos energy and was connected to the 16 rivers. This palace, like the Miluo Palace, the World Tree, and the Ultimate, appeared on all the rivers of the past 16 eras. He could vaguely see a figure standing in the palace. Is that the life force of the future? The master of the Miluo Palace was excited. He walked along the chaotic energy that was connected to the long river of chaos towards the palace. He was getting closer and closer to the palace. The purple energy around him blocked the resistance from the future. The palace was grand and simple, containing all kinds of strange das. He walked into the palace, but there was no one in the palace. There were only 16 long rivers of chaos. These 16 long rivers were the 16 long rivers outside the palace. He raised his head and looked up. At the end of the 16 long rivers of chaos, there was actually a palace of chaos. There was a blurry figure there. He walked forward, crossed the 16 long rivers, and walked into the palace. He saw that there were still 16 long rivers inside the palace, and at the end of the long river was a palace of chaos. At this moment, the master of the Miluo Palace did not know whether he was inside or outside the hall. He did not know whether the person in the hall was inside or outside the hall. The primal chaos village is like an egg, dim and silent. Houran Tai Su embraces Hung Meng. The circulation of Wen Qi is heavy. He could not help but let out a long cry. This was another Taoist technique that made him excited. It gave him the feeling that he would meet a fellow Taoist in the future. He continued to walk towards the figure in the hall. Hidden true water, true fire. Dense fog that coiled up like ice. Central origin creation, profound technique. 3 Qi divided into 3 parts. His great Tao trembled. He looked forward to receiving a response from the people in the hall. What a hall of chaos. Standing at the end of time and space, it led me here. This is the universe of the 17th epoch in the future, right? Fellow Taoists of the future, it wasn't easy for you to cultivate to this step. Your universe has yet to experience the calamity of destruction, right? The later studies have not progressed. The 17th universe's heavenly venerate Qin Mu pays his respects to fellow Taoist. The figure greeted him. The mind of the master of Miluo Palace shook. He chatted with this person called Qin Mu for a long time before returning to the 12th epoch. Chaos came from the future because he wanted to walk through the past 16 universe epochs and achieve the path of chaos. No wonder he always said he was the seventh brother of Miluo Palace. So he was the seventh one to achieve the path. The master of Miluo Palace thought to himself, young master's path was different from the others. Young master was someone who had reached an achievement that even the master of Miluo Palace couldn't reach. Even though Qinmu had returned to the past and the path of chaos was maturing day by day. However, he wouldn't be able to truly achieve the path of chaos until he had walked through 16 universe epochs. Hence, he was still lacking a little, so he couldn't be considered a true young master of Miluo Palace. Chaos comes from the 17th epoch. As long as I look through the future of the 17th epoch during the creation tribulation, I'll know if the future is still good. Miluo Palace Master revealed a smile. Qinmu saw the thin and long freak under Old Man Wuya. His name was Yojia, and Yojia meant eye in the center of the face. He was just like his name, and there was only one eye in the center of his brows that occupied half of his face. Qinmu smiled and gave him a kind smile. He gave Yojia pointers on how to cultivate his own eye, and Yojia was extremely grateful. Qinmu and Qin Lingjun floated away. Father, where are we going? To find Heavenly Venerate Ling. After a few days, Grand Supreme told Miluo Palace Master, Teacher, Old Seven barged into my forest of obelisks and saved Blasphemer Ling. The entire place was transformed by his divine arts, so if he wanted to save people, he could naturally save them easily, Miluo Palace Master said. Grand Supreme was a little unwilling and said, Teacher, Blasphemer Ling was personally suppressed by you. Blasphemer? What's a blasphemer? Grand Supreme, it's always been difficult for you to take another step forward, and that's the root of it. Think about it carefully, and once you've thought it through, you'll be able to take another step forward, Miluo Palace Master said. Grand Supreme couldn't figure it out. At the end of the 12th epoch, destruction calamity erupted. Blasphemer Ling killed his way to Old Man Wuya and heavily injured him. Qinmu then came to save him and scared him away. Old Man Wuya had been heavily injured in this battle. Many strong practitioners wanted to sneak into the next epoch, but because of this battle something went wrong. Some people discovered that Old Man Wuya's roots were connected to the 17th epoch. Who knew how many of them had been killed by a strong practitioner guarding the world tree in the 17th era? They called that person the Hunter of the 17th era. Because of this, Old Man Boundless' relationship with Qinmu became even better. Later on, a thin figure appeared beside Qinmu. And from then on, thieves started to appear in the 13th era. Many people were stolen, and Old Man Boundless was even more miserable. Miluo Palace was also stolen, and Grand Supreme said, The thief is in Miluo Palace. Thus, Grand Supreme searched for the thief and caught him. It was a thin old man who was sent to the forest of obelisks to be suppressed. The 17th epoch. It was the second year after Qinmu had left. Young Master and Grand Supreme confirmed that Qinmu had already left the 17th epoch, and only then did they relax. They sent all of them to the wooden ship forged by their Dao trees, and great change guarded the bow of the ship. Young Master's Grand Supreme sent them away and said, Fellow Taoists, when you return to the 16th epoch, you have to be on guard against Young Master's chaos. Great Change said, But don't worry. I've long known his true face and am on guard. When Grand Supreme sent them back to the 16th epoch, surging chaos chi surged from the depths of space and time. Grand Supreme let out a sigh of relief and returned to the origin world to transform into Tao and reincarnate. Just after Grand Supreme reincarnated, the forest of obelisks collapsed. A thin old man walked out from the forest of obelisks and left in a flash. I'm back. Laughter echoed in the void. In the 13th epoch, there was another young master in Miluo Palace. Young Master had no sect, and Qinmu returned to Miluo Palace to drink and chat with Young Master. In the 14th epoch, Young Master Zhangji appeared out of thin air. Zhangji was born in the returning ruins, and was the goddess of the returning ruins. Qinmu ran over again and chatted happily with Young Master Zhangji. The few young masters were very concerned about this little junior sister, so they chased Qinmu away so as not to ruin Zhangji. At the end of the 14th epoch, Qinmu brought Qin Lingjun to the place where destruction calamity was born. Qin Lingjun asked curiously, Father, what are we doing this time? Picking up an old friend. Qinmu had a smile on his face as he raised his head to look at the river of chaos. The sound of the zither came from the river, and a woman fell into the great calamity of destruction. Qin Mu raised his hand and pulled the woman over. Qin Lingjun held the zither and went forward, asking in a crisp voice, "Are you my mother?" The woman put away the zither and pinched her little face. She smiled and said, "I was almost your mother. My name is Yu, you can call me Aunt Yu." She raised her head and looked at Qin Mu, who was behind Qin Lingyun, with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Mu, you didn't go back on your words. How long have you been here?" 14 years. Qin Mu touched Qin Lingyun's little head and his gaze was gentle. Lingyun is already 14 years old. A year of chaos. To Qin Lingyun, she was already 14 years old. Ling Yuxiu didn't follow us? Heavenly Venerate Yu looked around, his gaze flickering. Qin Mu smiled. "No. But I found Heavenly Venerate Ling." Heavenly Venerate Ling came and picked up the unwilling Heavenly Venerate Yu. "Ling Jun might want a stepmother," she said to Heavenly Venerate Ling. "One. Some people don't want one," Heavenly Venerate Ling said. Heavenly Venerate Yu had the best relationship with her, and could say anything. He said angrily, "You aren't him, so how do you know he doesn't want one?" "I've asked," Heavenly Venerate Ling said indifferently. Heavenly Venerate Yu was so angry that he started to play the zither randomly. On the eve of life creation tribulation in the 15th epoch, the master of Miluo Palace was still looking at the future. However, Qin Mu still brought Qin Lingjun over, and a layer of chaos blocked his vision. On the eve of life creation tribulation in the 16th epoch, Qin Mu came again and still blocked his vision. The master of Miluo Palace was already used to being blocked by him, so he didn't say anything. Finally, the 16th epoch lasted for a short 600 million years before it was destroyed. This time Qin Mu blocked his vision again. "Chaos, in the past, you always blocked me from seeing the future, but this time you can't block my vision anymore," the master of Miluo Palace said. "I will see the future of the 17th epoch, and you can't block it. I want to see what the future will be like with my own eyes. Teacher, from the first epoch until now, no one is your match. But disciple has already attained the path, so I want to give it a try." Qin Mu let go of Qin Lingjuan's hand. "You are the strongest expert of the past 16 universe eras. Old Man Wuya, master of Tiandu, and even Heavenly Venerate Ling can't even withstand a single blow from you. But I'm different. I'm the strongest person in the future era." His body stood tall, and on the eve of creation tribulation, the 17th era was a vast expanse of chaos. When the destruction tribulation of the 16th era arrived, he had already attained Tao, and the him now was the strongest him. He had already vaguely felt his way to surpass the 40th heavens of Tao realm. His rune origin had completely transcended the primordial chaos rune, and he had absolute confidence in fighting the master of Miluo Palace. "Teacher, you once said that my Tao skill is the central origin creation profound technique, so I'm already very close to the realm you mentioned." An incomparably strong faith surged out of Qin Mu's heart, and he said solemnly, "I won't let you see the future." For trillions of years he had never tried to change the past, but now he wanted to change it and change his teacher, the fate of the master of Miluo Palace. The Miluo Palace master revealed a smile. "Fellow Taoist Hun Dun, you are very strong, but you are still lacking in mastery. Although you have attained the Tao, you are still far from my realm. In the eyes of others, I am like the master of the capital of heaven and the blasphemer Ling. My cultivation level is above theirs, but my cultivation level is inferior to theirs. In the eyes of Old Man Wuya, my cultivation level and cultivation level are inferior to his. But in front of you, your cultivation and my path are about the same. The only thing above you is my fire mastery." A strange light flickered in Qin Mu's eyes, and he asked in puzzlement, "Fire mastery?" "That's right," Palace Master Miluo said. "When you cultivate to our realm, your path and cultivation are about the same. The only thing you can compare with is each other's fire mastery. I have 800 billion years more attainment than you, and I have experienced the history of the first epoch more than you. Chaos, when you can return to the beginning of the first epoch, your attainment will reach my level and even surpass me. Chaos has an advantage that the primordial chaos cannot compare to. Your achievements will be above mine." He lectured earnestly. "You have experienced the destruction of 16 universes and the creation tribulation from the second epoch to the 17th epoch, but you have not experienced the first epoch. When you can return to the beginning of the first epoch, you will surpass me. It's just that right now you are slightly weaker than me. This point is the difference of a thin line. Qin Mu's expression changed slightly. Suddenly, his figure could be seen everywhere in the countless spaces that couldn't be divided anymore. There were countless of him in the countless spaces, and each of them executed different divine arts. None of these divine arts were duplicates. This was his supreme achievement. The countless tiny spaces in life creation tribulation were the countless possibilities of the future universe. They were the countless images of the future universe, and he could fill them up with a single thought. He had stepped into the path of Tao from the destruction tribulation of the 16th epoch. Even if it was too easy for him, even existences like Supreme Master and Wuji would find it inconceivable and impossible to understand. However, at the same time as he thought about it, a Miluo Palace Master appeared in each of those spaces. The move of the Miluo Palace Master was earlier and faster than him. When his divine arts had just erupted, the Miluo Palace Master had already made his move one step ahead of him. Qin Mu's body shook, and he vanished from the countless spaces. There was only one person left, but it was already too late. Miluo Palace also became the only one, and the divine art was already imprinted on his chest. A line was a line. The difference in the quality of the fire represented an infinite difference. If he wanted to make up for the difference in the quality of the fire, he would need even more time and effort to do so. Boom! Qin Mu fell back and was sent back to destruction tribulation by the Master of Miluo Palace. This strike of the Master of Miluo Palace was equivalent to sending him back to the past. Chaos, you will cultivate to my level and even walk ahead of me. The Master of Mycroft Palace smiled and muttered, "It's just that you can't do it yet." He waved his sleeves and sent Qin Lingjun back to Qin Mu's side. Without Qin Mu's interference, he could finally see the future of the 17th epoch. Qin Mu fell into the river of chaos and raised his hand to gently support him. Qin Lingjuan's feet landed on his palms. Qin Mu's expression sank slightly, and he gently put Qin Lingyun down. He had lost this battle too cleanly. The Master of Miluo Palace looked at the future. At this moment there was finally no longer any obstruction from Qin Mu. All the pictures of the 17th epoch flooded into his sight. From the creation of primordial chaos to the birth of 5 suns, then to the birth of great changes, tree felling, the rise of creators, and the emergence of ancient gods, the history of the 17th epoch began to evolve in a manner that had never been seen before. There was no world tree, no heaven-splitting multitude, and no Miluo Palace. The creator declined, and the dragon was divided into 3 parts. The bright red continued. High emperors opposed each other, and founding emperor rose. Eternal peace rose from the wasteland. 6 billion years passed in a flash, and Miluo Palace invaded. The world tree was reborn, and the future of 3.5 billion years fell into his eyes. His gaze paused for a moment, and he saw Qin Mu return to the past. Then his gaze continued forward. It was a future that Qin Mu had never experienced before. It was a colorful future, and it was even more exciting than when Qin Mu was around. However, as the gaze of the Master of Miluo Palace kept looking into the future, his Tao heart gradually trembled. In the 17th epoch, 100 billion years later, the vastness of the universe had already surpassed that of the first epoch. However, this universe still didn't have the tendency to stop expanding. After 200 billion years, no new Taoists were born. After 300 billion years, the vastness of the universe made the psionic bridge dim and unable to connect with other worlds. Only Taoists could cross the endless starry sky to look for their fellow Taoists. However, even Taoists took a very long time to look for friends. At that time, there were no more divine arts practitioners. The spiritual energy between heaven and earth had been stretched by the expanding universe and became extremely thin. After 400 billion years, most of the stars in the universe had already been extinguished and evaporated. The originally bright and colorful universe gradually dimmed. After 500 billion years, the last sun was extinguished, and the remaining holy lands also gradually lost their energy. The origin world collapsed, Xiandu disintegrated, and Hades no longer existed. The shady firmament world evaporated completely, and the various heavens walked towards the final void. 600 billion years later, The master of the Miluo Palace looked around, and the final Holy Land was extinguished. The 17th epic universe became pitch black, leaving only the occasional flickering light. That should be the afterglow of a Tao practitioner. He continued to look forward. It was pitch black, and the afterglow of a Tao practitioner was gradually fading away. He looked towards the end of the darkness, where the last afterglow of a Tao practitioner had also disappeared. The entire 17th epic universe was flattened, turning into an extremely thin and endless membrane. All matter had disintegrated into the tiniest particles, which were evenly distributed on the void membrane of the universe. The universe had completely turned into nothingness. The great nirvana. Pooh! The master of the Miluo Palace spat out a mouthful of Tao blood. The great nirvana of the universe after 800 billion years had completely destroyed his Tao heart. All of his persistence and all of his ideas were completely useless at this moment. His divine abilities and his Tao techniques were all useless. For a long time, he had been preparing for the destruction tribulation and the life creation tribulation. In the face of this destined great nirvana, his previous preparations were completely useless. Furthermore, he couldn't think of any way to solve the great nirvana. He was muddle-headed. Before the life creation tribulation of the 17th epoch arrived, he had walked out and returned to the destruction tribulation of the 16th epoch. He had returned to the Miluo Palace. He fell into silence and thought hard to find a solution. However, even with all his wisdom, he still couldn't find a solution. All the paths were wrong. Facing the final great destruction, all his efforts were in vain. He remembered his persistence in these 16 universe eras and all his hopes were crushed. He felt his Tao heart begin to disintegrate and collapse. The ideals he had persisted in were beginning to shatter. There was no way out. The master of Miluo Palace summoned all the young masters, hall masters, and Tao practitioners of Miluo Palace. Qin Mu was present as well, holding Qin Lingyun's small hand in silence. The master of Miluo Palace told them that the 17th epoch would definitely be destroyed in the future, and let them return to the universe that gave birth to them. There was no need to go to the future anymore. Everyone in Miluo Palace looked at each other in dismay. They didn't know why their teacher would say something like that. The master of the palace sat there dejectedly, not saying a word to anyone. The palace was in an uproar, and in the end, the master of the palace got up and left. He walked across the river of chaos, and the Grand Supreme followed behind him, watching as he returned his cultivation to the universe. By the time he reached the first era of the palace, the flesh and blood on his body had gradually dispersed. He walked up the stairs and the flesh and blood on his body disappeared bit by bit. By the time he reached the last step, he had already become a skeleton. The Supreme heard his teacher let out a long sigh and sat down amidst the sigh. His Tao tree appeared behind him, and the 16 Tao fruits emitted a faint light. The Supreme fell to the ground and cried loudly. After a long time, the Supreme walked out of the Miluo Palace and returned to the 16th epoch. He ordered all the young masters, hall masters and Tao practitioners to return to the universe that gave birth to them. The 7 supreme Tao halls that symbolized the supreme achievements of Jade Capital were placed around the Miluo Palace in the first epoch. The 7 young masters were deep in thought. Let's return to our respective eras. The Supreme sighed dejectedly. Young Master Zishao stood up, flicked his sleeves and left. Teacher can give up, but I will never give up. Young Master Ling Zhao's gaze flickered, and he stood up. Teacher will give up on his own ideals, but disciple can inherit it. If disciple also gives up, then there will be no hope. Without teacher, I can also overcome the destruction tribulation and the creation tribulation. He also stood up and left. Young Master Wuzong and Young Master Zhangji both sighed and left without saying anything. Young Master Wuji gave a light laugh and disappeared in a flash. Only Qin Mu and Grand Supreme were left in Mycroft Palace. Grand Supreme seemed to be about to enter destruction as well, and he raised his eyelids to glance at Qin Mu. He said weakly, "Chaos, why don't you leave? I was born in the 17th epoch, so I can't return to the 17th epoch yet." Qin Mu smiled and said leisurely, "Teacher has seen the entire future, so his Tao heart has died. However, what he doesn't know is that after he returned to the destruction of the 16th epoch, there were some subtle changes. Grand Supreme raised his eyelids again and glanced at him. Qin Mu got up and said, "We can return to the destruction of the 16th epoch. You will notice some changes that are different from when teacher entered the destruction." Supreme General was skeptical, so he got up and crossed the 15 long rivers with him to arrive at the 16th river. Tai. Supreme General suddenly rose into the sky and rushed out in the destruction tribulation to intercept Tai, who was escaping. "Chaos, why aren't you helping him?" Tai shouted loudly. After a moment, Tai was captured. Young Master and Supreme General suppressed him in the God Coffin of Burial Path and inserted Slaughter Path divine nails into it. He patted the coffin and said, "I've prepared this God Coffin for you for many years." Qin Mu smiled. "Senior brother, did this happen before teacher entered the creation tribulation of the 17th epoch?" Young Master Grand Supreme was stunned and shook his head. Qin Mu smiled. "Then take a look again." At that moment the destruction tribulation was in chaos. Countless Tao practitioners let out miserable cries and died one after another as they were devoured by waves of terrifying power. "Wuji, what are you doing?" Grand Supreme cried out. Wuji massacred in all directions and devoured Tao practitioners in order to strengthen his strength. Qin Mu stood beside him and asked, "This matter didn't happen before teacher entered life creation tribulation, right?" Grand Supreme was both shocked and furious. He saw Wuji actually trying to kill Zhangji and devour him. Just as he was about to stop him, Ling Xiao, Zi Xiao, and Wu Zong came over and surrounded Wuji. This matter had never happened before teacher entered life creation tribulation. Qin Mu's gaze flickered and he said solemnly, "Then is the future teacher saw in the 17th epoch still the real future?" Grand Supreme didn't understand what he was saying. Suddenly, a huge wooden ship broke through the layers of chaos and sailed into the long river, appearing on the battlefield where the young masters were fighting. The huge wooden ship was broken into pieces by the young masters. Grand Supreme was stunned and didn't know what had happened. He saw another Grand Supreme as well as many heaven-cleaving masses appearing on the battlefield, causing everyone to fall into a chaotic battle. "Senior brother, this has never happened before." Qin Mu suddenly moved sideways and Wuji grabbed Zhangji to seize his cultivation. Just as he was about to swallow Zhangji, Qin Mu crashed over with a loud bang. Wuji's bones and tendons were broken and he was sent flying backward. Grand Supreme was astonished when he saw Qin Mu raise up the entire river of chaos. In just a short moment, he had severely injured Ling Xiao, Zi Xiao, and No Sect. He had also severely injured the other Grand Supreme and sealed heaven-cleaving masses. Heaven-cleaving masses entered the broken ship that had been split into two. "Lingjun, send them to the pickling grounds," Qin Mu said. Qin Lingjun immediately drove the broken ship and carried a ship of heaven-cleaving masses to the pickling grounds. Tai vomited blood and looked listless. He raised his head and said, "Primal chaos, don't exterminate. Dao brother, please go." Qin Mu stretched out his hand and pointed, and Tai Yi's soul flew out. It passed through the creation tribulation of the 17th epoch and landed 9.5 billion years later in the 17th epoch. At that time it was precisely the time when Supreme transcended Tao and reincarnated. Supreme transcended, but his mother had given birth to twins in this life. The two brothers squeezed together. In the great calamity of the 16th epoch, Qin Mu smiled at Wuji. "Second sister, you wanted me to face you in your strongest period and I did it. However, second sister shouldn't remember this." Whoosh! The river of chaos of the 16th universe epoch rolled up and formed huge reincarnation. When the reincarnation dispersed, Wuji was still fighting with the three young masters. Grand Supreme looked at Qin Mu beside him with doubt and saw a girl beside him. He was a little lost as he had never seen this girl before. Zhangji raised his head to look at Qin Mu and asked, "Seventh young master, what happened just now?" Qin Mu smiled. Nothing happened. Zhangji no longer knew who he was. Her memories had been completely changed, and her appearance had also changed. She had become a girl. The others still had memories of Zhangji, but they had an impression of the girl beside Qin Mu. In their memories, Qin Mu had always brought this girl along. This girl was Qin Lingjuan's playmate. While they were talking, young Master Wuji had severely injured Ling Xiao, Zi Xiao, and No Sect. Grand Supreme had no choice but to step forward to help, but he couldn't do anything to Wuji. In destruction tribulation, Wuji was almost invincible. Father, who is this girl? Qin Lingjun came back and looked at the girl beside Qin Mu curiously. She wasn't affected by the divine art of reincarnation. Your playmate. Qin Mu had a smile on his face as his gaze passed through the rivers of chaos. He thought to himself, Teacher, have you realized it? The future you saw has already changed. Chaos filled Qin Lingjun's eyes as she looked at the girl that Zhang Ji had transformed into. She instantly saw through all of her experiences and giggled. How interesting. Suddenly, a huge hand flew out from Miluo Palace on the first epic's destruction. It crossed the 16 rivers of chaos and fell into the calamity, pressing down on young Master Wuji and pushing her all the way to Great Abyss of Sinkhole. The huge hand turned into a red knot and sealed the Great Abyss. Teacher. Grand Supreme Ling Xiao and the rest bowed down in unison. The corners of Qin Mu's eyes twitched. Even though the Master of Miluo Palace had moved to suppress Wuji, he didn't sense the awakening of the Tao heart of the Master of Miluo Palace. Qin Mu frowned slightly and brought Qin Lingjun and Zhang Ji away. So many things have happened, so the future you see is no longer the real future. Forget it, I'll go sleep. Chaos. Grand Supreme called out loudly, but Qin Mu and the other two didn't stop. Ling Xiao hissed. Second sister killed Zhang Ji. She killed so many Tao practitioners. Why didn't teacher get rid of her? This matter is a family scandal, so we can't spread it. Third senior brother. Tell the public that it was Shang Jun who did it. Grand Supreme ignored him and returned to the second epoch dejectedly. Young Master Wu Zong also returned to the 13th epoch. Only Ling Xiao and Zi Xiao stayed behind and took over Jade Capital, planning to descend to the 17th epoch. Great Change cut down the trees and cut off the smuggling channels. Young Master Ling Xiao then set up a blood sacrifice array. The Creator was born. Bo Yang mined the first absolute beginning divine stone. The era of the Creator came. The three God Kings rose, and the Supreme Emperor Juyu clan dug out the absolute beginning. Absolute beginning gave birth prematurely. Miluo Palace's primordial Saint Lord Supreme Emperor Juyu clan to the ancestral court, Jade Capital City. Great Change was in control, and the ancient gods expelled the Creator, ending the era of the Creator. Absolute beginning became the Emperor, and under the influence of the ancestral court, Jade Capital City, he built the Heavenly Court. Heavenly Lord Royal created the divine treasure, and the 7 celestial venerables of the human race rose. Heavenly Lord Royal observed the weather of the Heavenly Court and created a divine art, stepping into young Master Ling Xiao's Jade Capital trap. Time passed by slowly in the 17th epoch. 6 billion years had passed and they had arrived in eternal peace. Founding Emperor Qin Yi came to the ancestral court Jade Capital alone. He met the injured Absolute Beginning on the way, and Ling Xiao ordered people to float out of the river of chaos to help Absolute Beginning resist founding Emperor Qin Yi. At this moment, a light shone from the river of chaos. A girl carrying a lantern walked out of the river, and when she came to the surface of the river, she had already turned into an old woman with chicken skin and white hair. Founding Emperor Qin Yi, I'm here to bring you to Miluo Palace. The old woman smiled and said, There's a young master waiting for you there. The chaos was boundless and the river was endless. The sound of the waves was the sound of the flow of time. Seventh young master came late, so his status in Miluo Palace is not as high as the other young masters. He doesn't have many followers either. The old woman said to founding emperor, It's precisely because of this that those people criticized seventh young master and framed him with many bad names. However, those were all slander. At the end of the 16 rivers of primal chaos, in the first epoch's Miluo Palace, in the primal chaos palace, the founding emperor saw the seventh young master. Heavenly Venerate Qin, how have you been? In Hall of Chaos, Qin Mu and founding emperor Qin Yi talked for a long time before finally letting Zhang Ji send founding emperor Qin Yi off. Eternal peace should be alright, right? Qin Mu asked in a low voice. How have you been? This was the first sentence he had said when he had met founding emperor Qin Yi. To founding emperor Qin Yi, this sentence was just a greeting, but it meant far too much to Qin Mu. He had been separated from founding emperor and the rest for 16 universe eras, which were trillions of years. He had walked through endless storms and witnessed the life and death of 16 universes. The history he had experienced was magnificent, even more so than eternal peace. It was even more wonderful than that. He was afraid that he would forget eternal peace and his old friends. After all, he was only 3.5 billion years old in the 17th epoch, which was far too short compared to trillions of years. However, that was his hometown. Eternal peace must be all right. Qin revealed a smile and roused his spirit as he walked out of Hall of Chaos. Lingyun, heavenly venerate moon, and I have prepared for such a long time. It's impossible for eternal peace to be bad. He stood in front of the hall and looked at Miluo Palace, which was still tightly shut. Teacher, the future that you saw has never happened before. Qin said in a low voice, because when you turn around and return to the destruction of the 16th epoch, the future will no longer be like what you saw. However, there's one thing that you are right about. If I want to surpass you, I have to return to the first epoch, not to the destruction of the first epoch, but to the creation tribulation of the first epoch. 17 universe epochs and only 16 creation tribulations. It's indeed very strange. In the past, Qin was still a little lacking and couldn't return to the beginning of the first universe epoch. But now he already had enough maturity. In the destruction of the first epoch, the sound of Tao could be heard everywhere in Miluo Palace. It was the ripple that Qin path of chaos was searching for in the first epoch's life creation tribulation. Life creation tribulation was a great tribulation that could split the heavens and earth. The first epoch had a long history of 800 billion years. Logically speaking, no one would be able to sense this kind of ripple in the destruction of the first epoch. However, for chaos, the fluctuations created by splitting open the heavens and earth had always been there. Such fluctuations were deeply imprinted in the background of the universe and became incomparably minute. Even destruction tribulation wouldn't be able to destroy them. After a long while, Qin expression changed slightly. The chaotic cycles spun and cut through the time and space in the past crazily, cutting through the 800 billion years of history of the first epoch. Qin walked through the cycles and finally entered the incomparably long time of the first epoch. The magnificent epic of the first epoch appeared in front of him. He traveled back in time in the chaotic cycle of reincarnation, and saw all sorts of melodious and touching things of the past. Qin didn't stop. He continued to go back in time. Finally, when his strength was almost exhausted, he came to the time when the first epoch had yet to be opened. Perhaps he could find a way to solve the great nirvana of the 17th epoch from here. In the 17th epoch, after Qin left, the battle between Eternal Peace, the Path Builders, and Hall Masters of Miluo Palace was still ongoing. Jade Capital City no longer had 3rd Young Master Ling Xiao and 4th Young Master Zi Xiao. Eternal Peace also no longer had Qin, so the battle had been repeated. Jade Capital City had even attacked the vicinity of the origin world. Because Eternal Peace had such a powerful enemy, the reform was once again full of vitality. After hundreds of millions of years, Tao ancestor Lan Yuntian finally understood Young Master's supreme heavenly well and broke through it, dealing with supreme unusual treasures, leaving the Hall Master and those who had achieved Tao in Miluo Palace with no one to rely on. At this moment, Old Man wuxia returned and occupied the beast world at the back of Origin World. The roots of the world tree pierced through the space and time, allowing the prehistoric strong practitioners to continuously descend. When the prehistoric strong practitioners achieved Tao, more great overarching heavens appeared in the ultimate void, and fierce battles erupted between the two sides. Eternal Peace was attacked from both sides, forming a three-sided chaotic battle. Eternal Peace's reform was finally able to continue with a bang. The number of Tao practitioners in Eternal Peace increased, suppressing the two great forces. At that moment, Wuji had reincarnated and attained Tao twice. She had rebuilt Great Abyss of Sinkhole and slaughtered all directions. The Tao practitioners of the three forces rarely had a match for her. When Young Master Wuji was about to become invincible in the world, Young Master Grand Supreme and Great E finally revealed their astonishing battle prowess and fought against Wuji with their strength. Young Master Wuji was no longer invincible, but Grand Supreme and Great Change couldn't do anything to her. On the other side, Miluo Palace stood firm and began to occupy a portion of the heavens. They selected outstanding divine arts practitioners and imparted them with divine arts, paths, and skills in an attempt to take root in the 17th epoch. Old Man wuxia also took root in the beast world and ruled over a region. The three-sided war, along with the opposition between Wuji, Grand Supreme and Great Change, made the 17th epoch even more beautiful and colorful. Eternal Peace had once tried to destroy Miluo Palace and Old Man Boundless. However, just as they were about to succeed, Boundless would help Miluo Palace, and Miluo Palace would also help Boundless. And Supreme and Great Change would also help Miluo Palace or Old Man Boundless to resist Eternal Peace. However, when Eternal Peace was facing a dead end, Young Master Boundless or Supreme Great Change would also come to help Eternal Peace. This made Lan Yutian, Su Shanghua, and the others go crazy. Time was merciless and matter evolved. Even if there were great overarching heavens in the ultimate void, it would still be difficult to stop the expansion of the void. The heavens became wider and wider, and the distance between the heavens and the heavens became greater and greater. Mystic City became incomparably vast, enveloping the four extreme heavens and all the worlds in the heavens. New stars continuously appeared. They filled up the vast starry sky. Even heavenly dukes with vast divine abilities were unable to manage such a vast Xiandu. Mycroft Palace and Old Man Boundless immediately seized the opportunity to invade Xiandu and occupy their territory. This was the 100th billionth year of the universe of the 17th epoch, and the vastness of the universe had already surpassed the first epoch. Just as the master of Mycroft Palace had seen, such a vast universe made the 17th epoch as resplendent as the first epoch. With the rise of all four heroes, no one had the ability to unify the universe. Even Eternal Peace Heavenly Court had no power to govern such a vast universe. This was what Old Man Boundless wanted to see the most. His world tree covered an extremely wide area, and the places that Eternal Peace had no power to rule would become his territory. As time passed, even Old Man Boundless found it difficult to face the universe that was getting larger and larger. The universe of the 17th epoch was larger than the first epoch, and it was still expanding. The wars between the various forces were still continuing, but the frequency of wars was also becoming smaller and smaller, because they had discovered a terrifying fact. The universe had become larger, and the spiritual energy between heaven and earth had become thinner and thinner. Most of the wars between the various forces were no longer a battle of ideas. They often turned into wars for the Holy Land that was filled with spiritual energy and spiritual energy. Gradually, there were no new Taoists in the universe for billions of years. In the 200 billion year, Lan Yutian and Su Shanghua found young Master Wuji, Grand Supreme, and Taiyi to discuss the future of the universe. They persuaded the three of them to join forces to find Old Man Wuya. Finally, they came to Jade Capital together with Old Man Wuya. The giants of the universe of the 17th epoch finally sat down and discussed how to deal with the expansion of the void. We can only abandon each other's prejudices and let the great overarching heaven of those who have achieved Tao be branded in the ultimate void to stop the expansion of the void. Old Man Wuya said, "The Tao realm system of the ancestral court is also a Tao realm system. Eternal Peace practitioners who have achieved Tao can become Tao on the outside and brand their great overarching heaven into the ultimate void. As for young Master Wuji's path of returning to ruins, he can devour the ultimate void. With the addition of me and the practitioners who have attained Tao in Miluo Palace, we will definitely be able to stop this trend of expansion." The giants of the 17th epoch finally joined hands, calling it the first alliance of Miluo Palace in history. Great overarching heavens rose into the sky one after another, and were branded into the ultimate void of the universe. The most powerful existences of the 17th epoch tried to stop the arrival of the Great Nirvana. This was their first attempt. However, the evolution of the ultimate void space did not stop expanding as they had expected, nor was it crushed by the Tao practitioners into chaos. The power of the void space was still advancing. The ultimate void space fused with the other 35 void spaces. The great overarching heavens of tens of thousands of Tao practitioners could not even crush the ultimate void space, let alone tear apart their great overarching heavens. It expanded outward with the expansion of the void. In the second alliance of Ilua Palace, young Master Wuji said, "Cultivating the path of returning to ruins can restrain the void. Only by doing so can we continuously devour the expanding void and stop the expansion of the void." She didn't hold anything back and imparted her path of returning to the world. The second attempt of the Tao practitioners began, but when great abysses of returning ruins appeared in the void and tried to devour the void, they kept on evaporating and disintegrating. 7 billion years later, the second attempt was destroyed. In the third alliance of Mycroft Palace, Lan Yutian said, "Eternal peace has achieved Tao within and contains universe, and universe, so it can avoid being turned into void." However, the 17th universe had already reached the 300 billion year mark. The spirit energy and spirit qi in heaven and earth had become extremely thin. Let alone those who had achieved Tao. Even new gods were becoming fewer and fewer. Divine arts practitioners had become the strongest power in the secular world. There were no new Tao practitioners. After the third alliance of Mycroft Palace, there were more wars for the Holy Land. In the end, the War of the Holy Land ended. What ended the War of the Holy Land wasn't the reason of the giants, but the breadth of the universe. The expanding universe made it extremely difficult to start a war. The Spirit Energy Mutual Transfer Bridge, which had once caused eternal peace to undergo a qualitative change, was no longer useful. With the Spirit Energy Mutual Transfer Bridge between the two great heavens breaking, it became an extravagant hope to head to the other heavens. The connection between the great heavens was gradually severed. Despair pervaded all the heavens. At that moment, Saint of Thieves found Lan Yutian and Su Shanghua. He said, "After I was rescued, I once stole many treasures from Old Man Boundless and Miluo Palace and hid them in the chaotic space of chaos. These treasures might be able to release spiritual power and spiritual energy, delaying the great nirvana for a period of time." Su Shanghua shook his head. "No matter how many treasures there are, they can only delay the great nirvana for a very short period of time. What if they are treasures of chaos?" The pirate saint said, "Chaos told me that he and the daughter of chaos once collected the treasures in the river of chaos during the 16 cosmic epochs of destruction. They hid them in the chaotic space and the unclean field respectively. Perhaps they will be of use in the future." 1. Su Shanghua and Lan Yutian heard this, and their hearts skipped a beat. They went to the chaotic space and the unclean field respectively. Even though they were the most powerful Tao practitioners, it took them hundreds of thousands of years to reach these two places. The treasures hidden by primal chaos and his daughter became the life-saving straws of the 17th epoch. When those treasures were taken out and brought back to the various holy lands, the spiritual energy of the various holy lands was once again abundant. It extended the life of the universe. However, even the treasures of primal chaos would eventually run out of spiritual energy. This day would come sooner or later. In the 400 billion years, most of the stars in the universe were extinguished and evaporated. Only holy lands were still emitting spiritual energy to maintain life. On this day, an inexplicable vibration came from the universe. The vibration spread throughout the universe. Lan Yutian sensed the vibration and said to Su Shanghua, "The world tree collapsed." Old Man wuxia was torn apart by the power of the void. He transformed into the Tao. Void Flower sensed the faint sadness coming from the depths of the universe and shook his head. Old Man Boundless did not attain Tao. His foundation of Tao was unstable. His great Tao was vaporized by the void and no longer exists. They only felt sorrow and no resentment towards this enemy. Old Man Boundless' existence allowed the universe to last for a long time. If it were not for Old Man Boundless, the great nirvana would have arrived even faster. After Old Man Boundless died and his Tao vanished, there was a strange vibration in the void. Void Flower and Lan Yutian could not help but be bewildered when they saw that new universes were being born in the unclean field of the void. Young Master Taishang and Tai Yi found them. "That's Tai Yi's body," Tai Yi said to them. "He and the others who split the heavens have become Taoists who were suppressed by chaos in the past 16 cosmic centuries. They were sent to the unclean field by the chaos and escaped the life creation tribulations one after another. Now, the Genesis tribulation has caught up to them." Tai Yi said, "My body and Tiandu's are there as well. Our bodies are undergoing the Genesis tribulation. This is a backup plan of the chaos. They are using this method to extend the life of the 17th epoch." Tai Yi said, "I never understood why he did all these things. Why he collected so many chaos treasures during the apocalypse. Why he targeted the heaven-cleaving masses in Tai Yi. Why he put those prehistoric experts into coffins. Now I finally understand." He was filled with emotions. Chaos had already started to lay out its plans in the first epoch of destruction tribulation, and that was nearly 2 trillion years ago. What made him even more emotional was that this was the future that Qin had said. The future that the master of Miluo Palace couldn't see and the future that had changed. Su Xianghua and Lan Yutian's hearts palpitated. Nothing in the void could avoid life creation tribulation. It was just a question of how late they were. Qin had let these prehistoric strong practitioners, Heavenly Capital open the heavens, Great Change's corporeal body, and Heavenly Capital's corporeal body experience the life creation tribulation. It was to pour the last spirit energy into this universe that was about to go extinct. However, this last spirit energy still couldn't extend the life of the 17th epoch for too long. 500 billion years later, the last sun was extinguished, and the remaining sacred grounds gradually lost their energy. Origin world Xiandu Yudu and Heavenly Shade world no longer existed. The heavens disintegrated in the void and turned into nothingness. Strange tremors once again came from the universe, but young Master Grand Supreme and Great Change didn't say anything. Only Lan Yutian said, "Young Master Wuji, this old enemy, has evaporated in the void. The only sacred grounds left in this world are Jade Capital City and Eternal Peace." Eternal Peace lived in the ancestral quartz cauldron of origin, while Jade Capital City was a precious treasure refined by the master of Miluo Palace and young masters one after another. It became the last two sacred grounds of this universe and could still extend life and allow life to multiply. However, even the practitioners of these two sacred grounds could feel their own great Tao gradually becoming void. Sooner or later, their great Tao would shatter bit by bit, and they would also become mortals. Just like other mortals, they would also become void. After young Master Wuji evaporated, the ancestral quartz primordial chaos cauldron and Jade Capital City also began to split and expand, making everyone feel endless despair. They looked over and saw darkness in the universe. The sky turned dark. The chaotic space still hasn't bloomed? Su Shenghua's white hair turned gray, and he also began to age. The dirty space left behind by Qin had already completely disappeared. Apart from Jade Capital City and Primordial Chaos Cauldron, only the chaotic space was still there. Countless years after young Master Wuji's death, Heavenly Venerate Ling and Heavenly Venerate Yu had returned. It's not easy to change the quality of the void, and my Tao is also turning into void. Heavenly Venerate Ling said, "I can use divine arts to maintain Jade Capital City and Chaos Origin Cauldron, but I'm not sure how long I can last." Heavenly Venerate Ling's arrival had slowed down the evolution of the void for a long time, but it was also in vain. 600 billion years later, her Abhijna lost its effect. The primordial chaos cauldron and Jade Capital began to disintegrate, and the great Tao gradually turned into the void. But the chaotic space still did not bloom. After Ling Tianzuan's Abhijna lost its effect, the quality energy Nadizi Abhijna was completely useless. This Abhijna had already lost all its power. At this moment, chaotic chi surged in the void, and the mighty river of chaos surged over, injecting the last bit of energy into the universe. Qin Lingjun walked on the river of chaos and came to the side of the broken primordial chaos cauldron. My father told me that sacrificing the past 16 universes can delay the great nirvana. The young master sighed. The daughter of chaos was still here. He understood one more thing. Why did the chaos insist on letting the pregnant Ling Yuxiu cross the 16 rivers of chaos? Qin Lingjun was born in the destruction tribulation and had absorbed the power of the 16 destruction tribulations. She was 1 year old and she had grown up in the apocalypse. Only she could pull the 16 rivers of chaos to inject the last bit of energy into the 17th epoch. However, the 16th universe epoch would probably be destroyed along with it. He also understood one more thing, and that was why the master of the Mycroft Palace wanted them to return to their respective universes and not try to go to the 17th epoch. That was because the master of the Miluo Palace had probably seen this future as well. If they returned to their respective universes, then the extinction would come a little later. However, the Supreme suddenly shuddered. However, if teacher saw this scene, doesn't that mean that the future has never changed? All the efforts of the 17th epoch, all the efforts of the primal chaos, have all been seen by teacher? The future has never changed. He was in despair. He returned to the Jade Capital and died after entering destruction. He was finally like the master of the Miluo Palace. His Tao heart had died, But no one mocked him for learning from his own teacher. The Grand Supreme's funeral was very simple. Lan Yutian and Su Shanghua had also gone. Tai had cried so hard that the sky and earth had turned dark. His opponent of 2 lifetimes had still died in despair. Lan Yutian looked around. There were white-haired old men everywhere in Jade Capital. His former opponents had also aged. "Are you my mother?" Qin Lingyun asked when he found Ling Yuxiu lying on the sickbed. Ling Yuxiu hugged her and cried. Her life was coming to an end, and she finally saw her own flesh and blood on her deathbed. "I will protect mother until the day father returns." Qin Lingyun was very confident. The 16 rivers of chaos can last for a very long time in the 17th epoch. The river of chaos in the 16th epoch had turned into void space faster than she had expected. This universe didn't have much energy to begin with due to the invasion of the smugglers. After a million years, the 16th cosmic epoch was like a painting spread out in the void. The people and things in the painting could be seen clearly. People in the 2 holy lands raised their heads and could see the painting. A few years later, the 16th cosmic epoch gradually dimmed, and the people and objects in the painting disappeared without a trace. The river of chaos in the 15th epoch lasted a little longer, and eventually the painting also gradually disappeared. Tai saw young master Wu Zong in the painting in the 13th epoch, and Wu Zong also vanished into nothingness as the void extended. When the great nirvana invaded the 10th epoch, Heavenly Venerate Yu raised her head and saw young master Zi Shao and his wife hugging each other in the void. Their faces were filled with smiles, and they appeared to be very happy. Heavenly Venerate Yu seemed to vaguely hear that zither tune again. It was very moving and contained emotions that she did not have. As the long rivers of chaos were turned into void, Qin Lingyun gradually became weaker. The disappearance of the long rivers of chaos caused her to gradually lose her power. "Father will return." He said that the chaotic space would explode like fireworks. "That is the brightest light in the void," she said weakly to Ling Yuxiu. The first universe's destruction was also gradually turning into nothingness. That was the last barrier of this universe. However, the first universe's destruction was unable to withstand the void's destruction. Qin Lingyun became weaker and weaker as a result. When the void invaded the Mycroft Palace, they finally met with resistance. A skeleton was standing guard in the Miluo Palace. His Dao tree was shining brightly, and his Dao fruit was shining brightly, resisting the invasion of the void. "Teacher." Tai bowed down to the skeleton. The surviving Dao practitioners in Jade Capital also bowed down to the skeleton, tears streaming down their faces. In the end, the Miluo Palace Master's skeleton and Dao Tree Dao Fruit did not stop the void. He turned into the void as well. The 800 billion years of history in the first epoch spread out like a scroll in the void, slowly fading away. The master of the Miluo Palace in the scroll was magnificent. His gaze seemed to be looking at the chaotic space. The chaotic space was still there, but it didn't bloom. His gaze dimmed as it disappeared into the void along with the scroll of the first epoch. In Jade Capital City, the palace masters and the Dao practitioners of the Miluo Palace bowed down one after another. The moment they bowed down, their bodies turned into the void. Jade Capital City was like a painting. It unfolded beside the origin cauldron and gradually became blurry. "There's still a way to survive." The old Lan Yutian roused his spirit. He said, "The ancestral court's Dao realm system is to achieve Dao within. We can transform ourselves into the ancestral court's great all-heaven, and let all living beings live in our great all-heaven to maintain their lives. This way we can last for a very long time. We won't be able to last for long, and we will soon turn into void space." Some Dao achievers shook their heads. "To do this for mortals. Gods are for humans." Su Shanghua revealed a brilliant smile. Fellow Taoists, we are gods. The last gods." The Dao achievers were silent. After a moment, the ancestral court great all-heaven lit up in the dark void space. Without their power, the cauldron of chaos turned into a boundless painting scroll. The great all-heaven of the ancestral court formed self-sealing small universes. The life in the small universes was still continuing, and the Dao practitioners of eternal peace used their last strength to protect the Pure Lands. When it was dark, don't go out. This was a warning from the Dao practitioners to the living beings living in the sealed small universes. In the dark void, These lights were flickering and disappearing. As the void stretched out, the lights became more and more faint, and the distance between them became farther and farther, gradually becoming undetectable. After 800 billion years, the 17th era of the universe fell into complete darkness. The matter didn't change anymore because all the matter had been torn apart by the void. The entire universe was expanded without any signs of life. There was no light, no sound, and no color. There was only the endless, cold void. In this cold and despairing silence, the chaotic space gradually became blurry, as if it was about to disappear along with the void. Without matter, time also vanished. Suddenly, in the boundless darkness, a bright light shone over, illuminating the void-formed universe. That was the light produced when countless chaotic dreams exploded in the chaotic space, as if it was the final sound. Each and every one of the chaotic dreams shattered and shattered, as beautiful as fireworks. The chaotic space finally exploded. A figure walked out from the place where the chaotic space was destroyed and walked in the boundless darkness. He looked around and saw nothing but darkness. Only darkness. He walked on the void membrane and shouted loudly, "Is there anyone here? Is there anyone else? I'm back. Is there anyone else?" There was no more light in the void. "Lingyun, I'm back. Yuxiu, I'm back. Lan Yutian Su Shenghua, I'm back. Qinyi, I'm back." He walked for a long time. He called out again and again, but there was still no response. Just as he was about to despair, a dot of light lit up in the dark void. It was the great all-heaven of the ancestral court. It was a lonely and tenacious existence in the void. He stopped in his tracks, and his withered Tao heart gradually recovered. "I'm still here." A faint fluctuation came from the great all-heaven of the ancestral court. "We're also here." Another faint light lit up in the darkness. It was another great all-heaven of the ancestral court. "And us. We're still here. We're still waiting for your return." The lights in the dark void were like lamps in the darkness, lighting up one by one. Qinmu revealed a smile. "The end of God, Shepherd.